Hello and welcome to the B&B Show. My name is Brandon. Of course, if you don't already know right here, this guy to my left, that's going to be Seahawks. Brendan Nelson back in the house for your weekly show as we preview this upcoming matchup with the Miami Dolphins and them as a walking wounded crew, Brendan. But we got a little bit still to talk about here. It's good having you in the house, my man. How you doing?
I'm doing good today. I'm doing good. Thank you for having me on. And 2-0, right? So we're doing at least that good.
Hard to beat that, and fun, exciting games at that as well. Just a little bit, kind of a little more enjoyable at times watching these games with the consistency involved at times on both sides of the ball. But before we do pivot to this upcoming match against the Dolphins, which could see your Hawks reaching out there to 3-0, my man. It feels good to say. When's the last time we were 3-0?
2020. Yeah.
Were we in 2020? Okay.
Yes, we were.
Seems so
we
long
were 5-0.
ago.
Actually 5-0 is the best start in franchise history, and that was in 2020.
Man, the wheels fell off that year, didn't they?
They did.
They came right off the other end of it. Well, I always like to ask you on this to begin off and get that sort of high level view from you coming off the other game. I know we're a few days later past that game, but where are we at coming off this game with the Patriots? Obviously I know encouraged is going to be kind of your basic standing on this one, but as far as where you're kind of taking on the pulse of this team, where they're at and where they're going and where everything kind of currently stands as far as this season's concerned with this game, where'd you come from with it?
I remain pretty happy. I remain pretty satisfied. I'm happy to just kind of stay in this realm of just understanding what this season is and what this team is right now. I remain happy to win any game. I know that there are going to be some people who are going to get bent out of shape that New England's losing by 3 touchdowns right now, whereas we took them to overtime. People are definitely there are going to be people out there tomorrow, they're going to start getting a little worked up about that. But in the NFL, most games are close, so I don't read too much into that kind of thing. There were some obvious areas of concern in that game, mostly to do with the run defense and maybe the rushing offense, actually. But these are the areas where I think that we as Seahawks fans should have kind of expected there to be problems. This team had a lot of issues they needed to fix this offseason. They were not able to completely address every single one of them, and we know that. And these are kinds of the areas where I expected there to be issues. Like, I've talked about this a little bit before, but you go back to last year. The Baltimore Ravens run defense in the second half of the year was kind of the problem that they had. That second half run defense was one of the things that McDonald ran into that he wasn't able to totally fix. So combine that with where the Seahawks were last year, I'm not that surprised there are going to be some games like the game that we saw on Sunday where, yeah, there were some issues with the run defense. I feel like they were more schematic than they were related to the individual players, but regardless, I feel like games like that are going to happen from time to time. New England does have a pretty good rushing attack overall, I think, even if they don't have a good offense. So it was just one of those situations where you kind of run your weakness into another team's strength, and we're not yet at the point where we're able to patch that up. So I would remain encouraged by the fact that we've improved so much on third down. Last year, we were one of the worst teams in the league converting third downs and stopping the other team from converting third down. We've seen massive improvement in that area this year. I'm really happy with the way the passing attack worked in this game. We've had, JSN on this team for over a year now. We've been waiting for that game where we would just spam the ball to him over and over and over again because it's so hard to cover these little slot receivers now. We finally did it. That's really exciting. That's really encouraging. You're able to win a game without your top running back in a situation where you probably went into that game thinking, yeah, I kind of want to run the ball against this team. You overcame that. So I remain pretty encouraged and pretty happy with what this team is showing me now, even though I know that it's not perfect yet, but this year was never about being perfect.
Absolutely well said. I think, too, there's a bit of it with it on this sort of push-pull game of going on between the offense and defense here as far as this McDonald defense now, Brendan, because scoring's now down through the league again this year. And again, you're hearing a little bit of not the blame, but maybe credit being given to some of this McDonald Ian defenses that are out around the league causing these problems, or the Fangio defenses with the cover 2 high shells. And so the counter that they're telling us on that, the experts on this, on, okay, you get the cover 2 shell, which is going to take away the deep ball. Well, now you got to get back to the nitty gritty. You got to get back to running the football. Okay, bam, now it's going into the counter of your theoretical part of your defense here. And then now how does then McDonald counter that, right, on the other side of it a little bit? I wonder if that's a little bit of this tug and pull, because we saw with McVay the redoubling down this offseason to getting that offensive line built up so he could do just this. And in a lot of ways, it's A and B gap type runs with it, right? It's that going after those 2-man looks that we get sometimes in there in the nickel situations, and you just duo block the hell out of it. What do you think about that? You buying that?
Yeah. There's got to be an adjustment made here. And I don't know what the exact fix is, but something like that is probably the response, right? Because this is a pendulum. It goes back and forth. And in order to make it swing back the other way, offenses are going to have to start doing something to counter what these defenses have come up with, because it's working very well. I think that so far this season, teams are each NFL game is averaging about 2 touchdown passes total. So we're seeing the first 2 weeks, we have seen like 2 or 3 quarterbacks go over 300 passing yards. And by the way, most of the quarterbacks that go over 300 yards lose the game. So they're probably trying to come back at the end of that game, like Brock Purdy did against the Vikings on Sunday. He had over 300 yards because he had to keep throwing at the end of that game because they were behind the whole game. So I think that needs to be some kind of a response. And it's going to take a big effort to get back to where things were, because I get the sense that the NFL is a little bit desperate trying to figure this out, getting back to the offensive production, because did you see the Mel Kiper clip yet? You saw that?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, you did see it. Yeah, like the fact that somebody who is supposedly supposed to be taken seriously, right? This is not just some guy with 200 subscribers on YouTube. This is not just some random account with no profile picture on X. This is Mel Kiper Jr. saying, I think we need to ban two high safeties. Like, that's how dire this has gotten in some ways. And I think the NFL wants every game to end 42-41. So it obviously they're not going to ban 2 high safeties. At least I would certainly hope not. I would certainly hope that doesn't happen.
Well, I think he misses the boat as well. There's Kuiper on this one from a couple of different reasonings. First off, it's cover 3 is actually the main coverage in football still right now. That's what's run more than any other one. So pointing out cover 2 is kind of silly in itself if you're trying to go for there's this one coverage stopping us. It's a cover 2 shell, but it flips into stuff post snap, Mel, and he struggled with that one. And I think that conceptually, maybe he's just meaning cover 2 shells need to go away, and you can get to cover 2, but you have to start out in cover 3. I think that it's hilarious though that the offense has been taking their lengths for years, Brendan. They've been getting their advantages and taking advantages and grabbing bigger advantages and grabbing more in quarterback protections and all that. They can't touch the receivers and all of these things that came along down the line. And now finally the defense starts to come back along, not because there's been a rule change put in place, but because they've just naturally started to update themselves in a way of making themselves cutting edge in their schematics and approach, and their disguising, and their exotic approach, what they show you exotically wise from snap to snap. And that's what's the funny part about this, eliminating something like that on the back end from Mel's perspective. To me, I'd love to hear if you feel the same way. It's more, as we talked about, that defenses are finally, to me, starting to take that. We're going to go to that cutting edge approach. We're not going to be in that what you see is what you get. We're not going to be in the few moving parts, just pin back yours and play fast. Now we're going to be putting all of that complexity right back on your shoulders, offenses, and how are you going to deal with it?
Yeah. And it was about time. And I mean, it makes you really happy that you have a new head coach this year, right? Could you imagine trying Pete Carroll's philosophy in this current NFL? Like, they were already leaving you behind.
That's why it was so urgent to make the move as the team did, where some might have said, give it another year, and you had to make it now because this isn't just about where this is going. It's already in the middle of going. It's like that movie where he says, when's this is going to happen? And he's like, technically it happened yesterday at 3:00. It's like, this is the way that this league moves this quickly, and you got to move fast with it. And it makes them, you're like you say, the defensive hire of McDonald looks a little bit smarter now, and even more smarter in retrospect, not to mention he's been good out the chute, but because Seahawks might be on the forefront, right, Brendan, on this? Because if the league is shifting a little defensively here in the interim before the league can dream up some new rules, well, you then having a defensive minded team that way, you're going to benefit it from in this period like this. First, even like you mentioned, Carroll, but how about the offensive mind, which is now rendered a little more null with this as well?
Little bit. And I don't know if you've seen this too, but you've got Lions fans wanting Ben Johnson to get fired already. That's how quickly it's flipped. That's how quickly this has completely been turned on its head. And again, it's a pendulum. This is the same kind of stuff you see in poker. If you pay attention to the highest levels of competitive poker, there's an action and a reaction, and then there's a reaction to the reaction, and it keeps going. And because of that, things constantly evolve. So there will be a reaction to it. Eventually, these offenses will figure some way to counter this. Probably not going to be easy. Maybe it's as simple as we need to actually start developing real offensive linemen because offensive line play is so bad right now. But the response is going to come, and scoring will be back up at some point. But for the moment, yeah, I think that I don't think that it's going away. We saw this start last year, and it's continued into this year.
To your point on the offensive line, though, because I think let's just get back to that real quickly on this. You have an offensive line, so okay, we as a team are going to want to try to hit you deep and over top. We're going cover 2 shell. We're going to make you earn everything. We'll squeeze down and pinch down routes. Okay, the way you attack that now is in the running game. But then to your offensive line point, good offensive linemen are coming out. Good run blocking offensive linemen are coming out. So you can run the play, but do you have the people movers to truly get those guys off the line of scrimmage, especially these athletic defensive linemen that there is now, to make that strategy then work? It might be the right strategy, but it's a whole nother thing of whether or not it works because so many of these offenses are set up now for the spread base. We're going to have a guy who's pass protecting first and foremost and run blocking secondary.
Yeah, that's the nature of the beast, though. It's going to keep changing on you, and some of this stuff, I imagine that if you're, some of these teams probably feel like the rug is getting pulled out from underneath them.
Yeah, well, the offense was going so strong for years. It's also like being in the stock market, where it's going up for years, and you just think, oh, this ride will never last. This ride will never end, and then you wake up one day and no one opens up their paper anymore. But you open your paper and it's like market crash. Like it's all gone. Right. The hell happened? I was a rich man. Well, looking back at this game and what went down with it, just a couple quick little things on it. The Geno performance was outstanding. Were you as wowed by him as I was wowed by him? I think he played just about as good a game as we've seen when you put it all together of what was kind of going on and what was happening at that point. Did you feel the same way?
Yeah, that was special. That was a special game by Geno Smith. We still don't have things working all that well around him. In this game, we couldn't run the ball at all. I thought the interior of the offensive line was bad, mostly in run blocking, but pass blocking remains a little bit of an issue. You've got the drops. I mean, there were like 4 or 5 drops in this game, particularly from Noah Fant, and that's going to be a real problem because the thing about Noah Fant these last 2 years, he never dropped the ball. I think he had 0 drops over the last 2 years combined. He's got 2 in one game now, so we're going to have a conversation about that at some point if that doesn't stop. But you look at the way that he's doing it, like you look at the stuff that he's overcoming, the throws that he's making, like they are big boy throws. These are Aaron Rodgers type throws where you fit it into a shoebox off your back foot with the guy in your face and you're on the move and you're fitting the ball into this tiny little window. It really feels like it separates the people who really study tape from the people who don't when you have these conversations about Geno. If you really watch the tape on Geno, you will see a quarterback who is right on the edge of elite right now. You will see a quarterback who is playing probably not as good as Josh Allen, probably not as good as some of these other guys at the very top of the league, but he's not as far away from it as you might think. And he's overcoming stuff that other quarterbacks are not overcoming. Other quarterbacks that are playing really well are not overcoming this bottom 5 offensive line. They're not overcoming a running game that completely disappeared in one of the 2 games we played so far this year. They're not overcoming all these drops. And, that stuff, it never got to him. It never discouraged him. And I think you're seeing that leadership element kick into gear here, because that was one thing that McDonald talked about in the offseason when it came to Geno, right? We want him to step into that leadership role. And I'm getting the sense that things are proceeding well in that regard.
I am as well, and I think that is all pretty well on point from what we're seeing from him. It's sort of like Brendan. You had 5 real major things you're thinking about with Geno that if they get to improve those things, you will see this version, as you said, he's scratching on the edge of elite to maybe getting to a place of elite if you can take care of those things. And they've taken care of a couple of them. Grubb's presence and getting the ball out of his hands as quickly as he is this season versus prior other seasons is probably certainly helping. Giving him the reins to do these things as he is certainly helping. But like you said, still the run block, still the pass protection is not quite there up to snuff, which again, like it has prior years, Brendan, just makes what he's doing that much more impressive because it's easy to do it when it's doing good. You mentioned Josh Allen. He's got the 4th best pass protection unit in football by PFF's metric, and most of those guys in the top 10 are all up in, a fairly good stage of things as far as their units go, just on that measure, say nothing of the run game. Yet, he overcomes, he excels. He, in many ways, like they said, I thought carried that team on his shoulders, especially offensively this last week, and very happy he's our quarterback moving forward this year. I again still think he's on road here, Brendan, for a career year here. I know we got to get this line right, we got to get the run blocking right, but I just do believe in this offense. He's going to take to it so well, and I think the roughest parts are going to be early on, don't you?
You would think, right? You would think, because the offensive line has been so rough so far this season, it can only get better. It's hard to get worse from where they are right now. They are right near the bottom. They are, according to the pass blocking aggregate that Ben Baldwin posts sometime, they're like 29th. It's hard to get worse from 29th in a 32-team league.
Yeah.
So just by virtue of that, things should get better. And people are kind of getting caught up in the opponents. What I would say is this. Both teams we played so far this year are probably bad teams. But I would say they both have pretty good defenses. I don't know about Denver, that we need to see a little bit more, but I think Denver's going to have a pretty good defense this year. And I definitely think New England's got a pretty good defense as well. I think they're going to be, at the very least, a little above average, especially given the fact that they'll have a terrible offense. So I know people are trying to filter everything through, it's just the Broncos, it's just the Patriots. No, these are good NFL defenses, I think, or at least above average.
Yeah, I think I agree with you on that on both of those two, that when it shakes out, these teams will have their share of wins. They're not going to be just teams that are complete doormats of the NFL. It's a tough pull from both of their angles, Brendan. On the opponent side, you pull the Seahawks on the road week 1 from Bo Nix's standpoint, and then you got to take on the Steelers the next week after that. That's 2 fairly tough defenses to deal with for a rookie quarterback in his first 2 games. And then you look at the New England Patriots with Jacoby Brissett at quarterback. You've got to go on the road to Cincinnati initially. Then you're back home against us, and then you've got to go play the Jets. That's not an easy setup on your schedule to begin things off. And so I think that is correct. You can't really look at the games of, we should have had them beat by 3 because this team did die by that. It's a matchup game. You're on the road at 10 a.m. That's different than the Jets being on prime time, going 20 minutes down the road or whatever to where they need to go to be the stadium there to play that game. I just don't, I think it's apples to oranges kind of situation. You can't do that. It's every week is its own individual week, and you got to grind out those wins. You said earlier, and we've seen this as a trend this year, many close games across the board in the NFL, few real true blue blowouts all over the place. There are some, but by and large, everything is being pretty close in how it's being played, week in, week out. So you got to kind of look at that too as the trend in there. And some of that's the low scoring nature. Low scoring means things are just going to be tighter by the general nature of things.
Yeah, and it's also the nature of this league. I feel like even when scoring was high in recent years, most games were still pretty close. This isn't college football where one team has 5-star recruits and the other team has 1-star recruits, and it's just like a point and click game for the team with 5-star recruits, right? It's like in college, you see these games where it literally ends 70-0 because it's not even fair. That never happens in the NFL. You don't get that in the NFL.
No, it's any given Sunday. Any team can beat you, and you gotta break it into account. And I mean, even looking at the LLB teams, I mean, think about the game in the Super Bowl year we won against like the Vikings that we took on. That was a Christian Ponder-led Viking team that gave us some issues in that game for a while there. Or there's one of those games in the Vikings we played where they gave it a hard time in our house. So week by week, just get those wins, Brendan, and that's what they did this last.
Well, the great example of that, the year we won the Super Bowl, would be Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay was the worst team in the league that year. That was the Greg Schiano Buccaneers that started 0-8. They came into Seattle and were up like 24-0, I think, and then we had to come back.
Mike Glennon.
Yeah, that was Mike Glennon, Greg Schiano. That game infuriated me because I really didn't want to lose to Greg Schiano because he was like a gigantic,
insufferable.
Yeah, he was awful. He was losing to a bad team is one thing that happens, but you can't lose to Greg Schiano.
No, he was one of those guys coming out of that, I think, Bill Belichick tree or something, that was just one of those just hard ass types that was just like, come on, this guy's just too much.
Yeah.
They had like a fourth down. He was the guy with the fourth down. If you took a fourth down knee, he was instructing his guys to like dive on the quarterback or something, I think.
If you were taking a knee at the end of a game, he would tell his defenders to try to like jump the line to like get the ball. And say what you will, that actually worked twice when he was at Rutgers. He actually won a game that was over because they were kneeing the clock out because of that. So it's like, Al, how mad can I be at him if it actually got him a win? Like,
my thing too is I'm with it. If there's time on the clock and we got to compete, why should we just let you take the knee? Like, who said that that's the unwritten rule here, that we have to do that?
Yeah, I feel like every other coach in the league had this understanding that like once one team is taking kneeing the clock out, the game's just over, and it's just a technicality at that point. But he was the one guy who was like, well, I'm not going to play that game, and I don't think you should necessarily have to play that game. But there was a lot wrong with the Greg Schiano era. There was a lot not working there.
That was not the best.
He was the chopping wood guy. He had like the wood in the locker room that the players would chop. I mean, that's pretty cool. There's nothing wrong with that, but yeah. I didn't want to lose to Greg Schiano.
No, and we were able to mount a furious comeback to take that win. But the bottom line point being is that can't really analyze, I think, the wins in that way of like, should have had more of it. Get the win, keep it moving, keep them stacked. Let's go get that franchise record of 5-0 if we can, 1 week at a time. And defense played good overall. Held in strong, I thought. You mentioned the running game, but like we just covered on that a little bit of, I think what's going on a bit there with the running game is this a natural way teams are going to attack it. And the other thing I'll say about it too, Brendan, is that it's a little easier to swallow the run game woe pill when you're a top 3 team in the NFL at stopping the pass. It makes it a little bit easier for me. And so as we've talked about, stopping the runs, not the end all be all. It's really at the end all be all, stopping the pass. And then you'd like to just cinch up the run as well as you possibly can. And so if I've got to make a trade off of that, I'll take this trade off because I think this will be the part that can, as we've seen the first 2 weeks, can be most effective.
Right. And I feel like that this game is a great testament as to why, even with the way the NFL is going right now, and maybe this won't be the case in 2 years, you want to have that passing attack much more than you want to have that dominant rushing attack. Like, New England ran the ball for almost 190 yards in this game. We didn't even get 50. We still won the game. Like, ask yourself this. If there was a game where one team's quarterback was like completing 40% of his passes for 90 yards and 3 interceptions, and the other quarterback's throwing for 400 yards, 80% completion, 4 touchdowns, you never see the other team win. It just doesn't happen anymore because quarterback play decides so much at the end of these games. So if you have to pick one, and to a certain extent, you can say we kind of do have to pick one because we couldn't fix everything in one off season, you'd much rather have the great pass defense, because at the end of close games, that's more likely to be the ultimate decider. Like if New England is out there at the end of a game and they're down 4 with like 2 minutes left and they need to go score a touchdown to win, Ramondre Stevenson's not really going to help you in that spot. It's your passing attack. And when and if New England finds themselves in that spot at points this year, they're probably not going to be happy with the result because Jacoby Brissett and Jalen Polk and Kendrick Bourne are not good enough, especially with that terrible offensive line. So this is I think, the formula for a winning team. Maybe in a couple years, it'll be like the 80s again, and everybody wants a dominant running game. But right now, this is where the league is.
It is indeed. And so you just lean into that trend, I think, as much as possible. Work to stop the run. I think we got the bodies down to there to do it. There's been years, Brendan, where we've had lightness down there or lack of talent down there to hold up to make you feel like it could confidently get to a place of maybe getting, better as the year went along. I do think with this and the onboarding of the scheme and understanding your gap integrity, play in and play out based on individual calls, will get better with time, even on that defensive line front. But I don't think, again, it's the end all be all when especially you're doing so well at stopping the pass in the back end. That's going to, really at the end of the day, I think carry the weight for this defense and what they're looking to do first and foremost, almost.
Yeah, and I didn't get the sense that like the players were playing really badly against the run. I felt like it was more just like, and McDonald even said this after the game. He felt like the problems were more schematic, and he's going to go back to the drawing board and try to figure out what went wrong. And I kind of got that sense in that game too, because it's not like we were missing 3 tackles every single play. It's not like we had 20 missed tackles in this game. It was more about people not being in the right place at the right time. So that's something that feels a little more fixable. Like last year, we had these games where we couldn't tackle anybody, and that ended up not really being all that fixable.
Well, you never like to take one play too. You got the one play with Boye Mafe on the pitch in the backfield where if Mafe makes that for a negative 4-yard loss on Gibson instead of turning into what was like, I think, a 50-yard gain on the play.
Right.
That changes a lot of the day and the scope and the look of the day from the running back's position at that point, as far as their efficiency, at least. They got the run. He missed the tackle. And I think Boye was kind of huff. They played a lot of snaps these first 2 weeks, this defense has. And so I was wondering a little bit if maybe there was a little bit of that setting in a tiny bit there into points in that game, in the run game, but something to, keep an eye on as we go forward and see if they, can continue to track and improve it. Any other last things on the game, or you think we kind of covered what was mainly at the forefront of your mind at this one coming out of it?
I think that basically kind of sums up what went down in that game. I don't think there's too much to say to it other than that you won and you did what you needed to do at the end of that game. What I do want to ask you though, what do you think about the way Seattle's approaching these 4th down decisions so far?
I've been happy with it. I think in the early part of this game where you chose to go for a 4th down, it was not the same game as what it was when you got to the later part of the game. And that as a coach, part of what you want to do is read what's happening in a game. Like you might walk into a game and think we're going to be in a defensive battle in this one. Field goal point, can't let field goal points go. You got to take every point opportunity you have. You're on the road. But then if you have a game where it's starting out and the scoring is going a little higher, like this one was to start things when it came to that first 4th down decision, I think at that point, then you've got to go, okay, look, it's not, field goals aren't going to get done here today. We're going to have to maybe outscore them a little bit on this based on the way this has kind of been playing out so far. So I like that reading of where you're at rather than having a stagnant approach of we're on the road, take the points and make it that. Now the 4th down call with Geno, the calls themselves, that's where we get to, like you'd probably say about that Husky call last week, Brendan, I like the call to go for it, but maybe not the exact play call itself at all times, right?
Yeah, I think more than anything, it's just an issue of we don't have the interior line to do the things we want to do on 4th and 1. Like I'm sure that every team in the league would like to just run a free QB sneak for a yard on every 4th and inches, but we don't have the interior for it right now. And maybe later this season we will, and then we'll just be able to run it every time we want to. But for the moment, we just kind of have to live with the fact that the personnel's not there. So maybe there will be a spot where the analytics say go for it and we won't go for it because we don't feel like we have the right personnel for it. And I totally respect that. I think at the end of the game, McDonald even said our analytics told us to go for it, but I decided to just kick it because it just didn't feel right. And that's the kind of stuff you have to do when your interior is playing that poorly.
Yeah, the analytics are there to kind of help you on it, but they're not necessarily guiding you wholly on it. And I like that he's not doing it that way. And yeah, I think that the play calls be a little bit better. I mean, the Geno, if he's got a half yard, he's pretty good about finding a gap to jump through. If it's got to be a yard and a half, like that one was where they were just a little bit too far to be trying to pull that off, go to the misdirection. We talked about in our lead up to the New England game, and something I wouldn't mind seeing even this game is, utilize some of that misdirection. It was in the UW offense last year. It was something that Grubb utilized. A lot of where we're going is where we're going kind of on these plays. And that was a play where you could do a, fake fullback dive and pitch it outside, something with a little creativity, or get Geno rolling out in space and have it in his hands on a day where he's balling out so well. A little bit of a better place to go with that call rather than just that. But for the reasoning of going for it or whether not to go for the moments, I'm completely okay with, I've been totally on a yes nod in my head each time that he's done it on those.
Mm-hmm. I'm on board with it too.
Y2KHA come in with a little baseball and a $2 donation. Says Shohei Ohtani is a god. Not the god, but a god.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a lot of fun, isn't it? It's very, very, it's very fun having a player like this in the league. It is.
If we had just gotten Ohtani and then we made the deadline deal moves that we made, what is that in your heart of hearts and saying where that team would land upside wise final for a baseball season? Where would that team end up?
This is that's a 95, 96 win team, I think, pretty easily.
Do they win the series with the pitching?
Baseball's so unpredictable when you get to the playoffs. I think they'd be a strong contender, and that's all you can ask for, right?
Good
Baseball
enough,
gets
yeah.
super random in the playoffs, but I mean, I didn't know he had that in him, by the way. I didn't know he had the stolen bases stuff in him, by the way. I thought he was just kind of like a decent base runner. I didn't know he had the 50 in him. That's wild.
Yeah, it's almost like he's not able to pitch this year. I'll do something else a little bit better almost. But yeah, the speed wasn't something I thought necessarily he quite had as much either. Mm-hmm. But the difference that one guy would have made on that, and even still you would have had issues in your lineup and hitting and whatnot, but it would have been enough to get you over the top to what you say on the win total. And once you're in the playoffs, anything can happen. And playoffs do tend to be historically pretty kind to those teams that have the starting staff that the Seahawks would be able to throw into any game series. But Ohtani, great player, fun player. You said one of the more unique players in baseball history, and he's balling. Mm-hmm. He is definitely balling. Thank you for the donation. Eric Michelet, thank you for the $5 donation. Eric says, I've been loving me some grubby play calls and schemes, but with the interior offensive line struggling, that 4th and 1 up the gut run was a head scratcher. Yeah, that's the place we're definitely in agreement on. We like the going for it, but especially as you've done it, I think they had already done it twice, right, Brendan? Hadn't we had 2 conversions already with the Geno jump up over the middle thing?
Well, we had the one. I don't think there was a second one, but either way, yeah. And I liked going for it the second time. I didn't really like the play call because of the way the interior had been playing. And Charbonnet's not the kind of back that's going to be able to create a yard out of 3 guys being in his face immediately. That's not his game. By the way, I guess that's another thing we could talk about, right? I this week I've seen people beating up on Charbonnet, and I think people really need to understand how he doesn't really have a chance with the way this front line is blocking for him right now. So, like, you got to understand that he's not like Walker. Walker might be able to make something out of plays like that. Charbonnet's not that kind of guy. That doesn't mean he's a bad player. That doesn't mean that, some people were kind of, I don't know. I saw a lot of negativity around Charbonnet this week.
Yeah, there's definitely been a bit of that, as you see it's such a wide difference between him and Walker and that productivity of what you see between them, even in the game of the Broncos when Charbonnet ran it versus when Walker ran it. And so people do find themselves far down on him. I do think Charbonnet has some value to add. I think he's a little more reliant on having his blockers blocked, to your point. Mm-hmm. And if the holes aren't there, he's not a creative guy. I've always said, Brendan, running backs are like guitar players. And people like to think of him as like a 5 archetype thing, but it's more of like, you got your jazz master guy, you got your rock and roll guy, you got your hillbilly kind of, you got every different type of guitar. It's a style thing. And Charbonnet's got his certain styles of work, and he's got good things. He brings pass catching and ability to finish runs. Not necessarily a power back, to your point, like you're just making a second where he's not, you look at him and think he's a 3rd down one, give it to him, let him bowl forward. That's not really it. He's more of a gorer, right? Like a bull gorer. So it's more of, he needs a couple yards up going in space, and he gets that speed going, and then he puts his head down, and he's going to put the horn right through you. But he's not going to be the guy of, I've got no momentum going and I can just suddenly shift my way out of this and get out over here. That's not really how he's built to go as a back. And that's just a different style thing more than it is he doesn't have a talent thing. You buying into that?
Yeah. That's always how I felt about Charbonnet. I felt like there was a misconception about the way he plays based on his highlight reel where he's running over guys. So people are like, oh, he's a power back. No, I think that he's a really good 3rd down back. Like, you look at a couple plays in the second half of this game, you have the 3rd down conversion that he had in overtime. That's classic, that's how a screen pass should work. You had the blitz pickup on that throw that Geno had to JSN on the first drive of the second half. That's the kind of stuff that he's really good at. He can run with power, but he needs a runway to get going. He's not going to just do it like Christian Okoye. He's not going to do it like that.
Yeah.
He's more of a kind of typical running back in that spot. So I think people kind of got it in their head that he's like the Thunder to K9's Lightning, but I don't think that's an accurate representation. And I think that's fine. I think that power backs in the modern NFL are kind of going extinct. I feel like you don't have too many true power backs in the league right now. A lot of them are like the tiny little bowling balls, like almost Maurice Jones-Drew type of power backs, more so than the Brandon Jacobs power back.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, Henry's about all you got. Henry out there, and again, just to your point on this, the rest of the guys, you go from Saquon to Christian McCaffrey to go down the list. These other back Kimuras there are more guys that are the shiftier run around you guys than they are to run over you kind of guys. And look at how the AJ Dillon experiment kind of flamed out with the Green Bay Packers, because he was brought in to be that guy, old school 230, but hasn't really worked there with him. And that's before he suffered this season ending injury there. So, maybe it is a dying species.
Yeah. I mean, this Braylon Allen thing's pretty fun, but
he is good. Yeah, he's fun. We were right on that one, Brendan. Cha-ching. Another B&B. We got to have a word. We need a term for that. A B&B lock.
Yeah. Or something.
We liked Braylon Allen. We were all over Braylon Allen from Wisconsin because you just said you don't find these guys, right? The explosiveness with the size he brought, because you saw the explosiveness with him on tape with Wisconsin, but then he had this legit size that none of these 190-pound running backs now coming out have anywhere close to the vicinity of.
That's right.
Thank you, though, man. Appreciate you, Eric. And we're with you on the fourth down calls. Just got to get the play calls right. That's the key here. Upo, thank you for the $10 donation, Upo. You guys are hilarious with the Greg Schiano reminiscing. Maybe a Jim Mora Jr. roast is in the cards for a future video. There's a lot of, much like Schiano, there's a lot of meat on that bone, Brendan. That's a brisket that we can probably slow cook.
Yeah, I mean, he was like the last honest press conference guy, though. So I didn't mind Jim Mora Jr. He was fun. I didn't have disdain for him the way I had with Schiano.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just that temper and anger was just always bubbling there beneath the surface on Jim. He looks like he's softened a little with age. That'll happen.
Yeah. I mean,
Seahawks Jim was,
Yeah. The best part of the Schiano era was when he busted out the jumping over the line on the kneel down against the Giants when they had Tom Coughlin. And Coughlin wasn't having it. And you know how Coughlin could get, right? He looked like you give him a pitchfork and horns and he looks like the devil. So in the post-game handshake, he let him have it.
Tom Coughlin be frowning when he's raising the Super Bowl trophy. Just he's got that natural resting face. And so you piss him off, you can only imagine. But yeah, he lit him up. I think they had a weird shake too there at the at the midfield thing where it got in, and Coughlin did his old man, when he gets all craggy like he would there at the end.
Right.
But thank you, Upo. Greg Schiano, man. That was where is Greg now? He's probably somewhere.
Did he go back to like Rutgers or something? Because that's where he was. Let me look this up. I'm curious now because I haven't heard his name in a long time.
Rutgers.
Let's see here. Yes, he is the head coach of Rutgers. So he went right back to where he started. Let me see here. Yeah, Rutgers for 10 years, Tampa Bay. He was the assistant defensive coordinator at Ohio State for a few years, and then he went back to Rutgers.
Yeah. Well, hey, maybe get Rutgers right. He's getting some NFL players out of Rutgers at least. At least he's developed
a little bit.
Guys, so
he's got a losing record as a head coach. Huh.
Rutgers is a tough one too. Don't they have academic standards thing going on too, though? That same sort of not substandard thing, but like it's hard to recruit. You gotta have the kind of the brainiacs along with the players. It's hard to do both of that.
Yeah. I had a friend like 20 years ago who was not really into college football, but he was a Rutgers fan because they were the closest college to him. And he's like, yeah, that's the dirty part of New Jersey. Like,
no, is it?
Yeah.
It's the rough side of New Jersey. Not saying something. What I mean? You got the mobster thing, and you get past that, then you get into really the rough area. That's Rutgers. Thank you, man, Upo. I appreciate the donation. Well, let's push this forward here this week now, Brendan, to this upcoming matchup, because this one's an interesting matchup, and I think you set the baseline here. Let's not come into this with too much confidence. not because we can't win this game, but because this is going to be a fight. I've been joking that I think that there's nothing more dangerous in the animal world than a cornered dolphin. And I think we're going to get their best fight. We're going to get that sense of urgency from them, despite the injuries they are dealing with. But as we saw with the Rams, didn't we, with this last game against the Cardinals, you do get to a place from a team standpoint of injury, can deal with it. Injury. Oh, it's starting to hurt. Injury. Oop, that's one too many. We just don't have the supporting staff to be able to keep this hotel open. Do you think that the Dolphins are heading to that spot, or is it merely it's just the Chubb, Tua injury at the forefront? And we'll talk about Tua in a second here, but that's really the main word. They're really actually more, not strong, but this fight's going to be more even keeled on that approach, especially considering our injuries.
Well, I think that there is a pretty long and established history in the NFL of teams that don't have their quarterback really giving everything they got, trying to fight through that problem in their games without that quarterback. In the back of their heads, they know that, like, we don't have a quarterback to bail us out. We got to play perfect football to win this game. We have got to go so far above and beyond expectations to have any chance of winning this game. And I think a well-coached team will approach games like that. And I do think that Mike McDaniel is a great coach. I think he's one of the best coaches in the game. So I imagine that you're going to see something from that defense that you didn't really see those first 2 weeks. And we know about the McDaniel, run offense. We know about the stuff he schemes up with that rushing attack. That stuff is not going to go away just because he doesn't have his quarterback. If anything, he's going to lean on that stuff more than ever. So it's going to be really on McDonald to come up with something to counter that, because you know what they're going to do, right? You know exactly what they're going to try to do in this game, because this is not, and a lot of people have already made the joke this week about, the Seahawks versus backup quarterbacks usually doesn't go well. This is not Teddy Bridgewater. This is not Case Keenum. This is not Colt McCoy. Skylar Thompson is not really an NFL quarterback. Like, he doesn't have the NFL skill set. He doesn't have the NFL arm. He's just, he's technically more there aren't enough quarterbacks to go around, so he's in the league as a quarterback. But he doesn't really have the NFL quarterback skill set. It's very different when you compare it to something like a Colt McCoy situation. So you know what they're going to do. They're going to run the ball a lot, and they're going to throw the kitchen sink at you in terms of all this stuff they can scheme up. And I'm not taking it lightly at all, but you, as Mike McDonald, need to find a way to make sure that doesn't beat you, because it's going to look really bad if a team quarterback by Skylar Thompson is able to run the ball all over you, because you knew going into the game that's all they were going to try to do.
Indeed. No, it certainly is the place I start with in this game too, Brendan. Devon Achane, Jalen Wright. I believe Mozart's out, if I'm not mistaken, but that's still two very good running backs. Me and Brendan scouted Jalen Wright. I think I liked him a little better than you did, but I think you did even at that time acknowledge the big playability, if I'm remembering.
He was the Tennessee guy, right?
Tennessee guy, yeah.
I think he had a fumbling problem, but I did like him otherwise, actually.
He's good. I liked him too. I think I did put it late second, third round grade. I can't remember where I was at, but right in that territory. He's quality, even though they're down with Mozart, so they still got enough strength there. I've joked too, Brendan, they might run 10 fly sweeps with you between Waddle and Hill in this game on the counter of it, and it's a lot of misdirection will be, fake and then flip back this way. And they challenge you from a fundamental standpoint with all of the eye candy in front of you to keep yourself disciplined, because you step one wrong direction and they've got you. Basically, it's a big part of what they do offensively is built on that.
Yeah. And expect it all to come out in a game like this that Miami really needs, because they've already started 1-1. They're 0-1 in the division. Honestly, they didn't look that good in week 1. They just found a way to win anyway. And we know what they can do. I mean, it comes from that Shanahan tree, right? McDaniel. That's going to be really tough to get through this week, by the way. McDaniel, that's not going to be fun. Yeah, it's the Shanahan tree stuff. It's the same kind of stuff that you see in San Francisco. So we've certainly seen it before. Haven't really seen it with a quarterback that doesn't know how to throw the ball. So you should be able to come with something to counter it, because what else are they going to do that whole game? They're not going to be Like the talent of those receivers is going to go to waste for a lot of this game because they have a quarterback that just doesn't really have an NFL arm.
Well, I think to your point, you'd agree with this then that Tyler Huntley, if Tua is out this season, Tyler Huntley is going to be the starter there sooner than later.
Yeah, I would think so. He actually has some NFL credentials. He's won some games in this league. He's done some good things in this league. He can, at least he's annoying to play against, right? At least he's like frustrating for a defense at times, I think, because of his mobility. And if you can't be good, then at least be annoying, right?
And I think back to your point, this what they did with this kid, why they don't already have a Huntley in here rather than this kid, is that you just went and paid Tua. And as we know with this, what do you do when you start to pay the first quarterback on the front end? You go as cheap as you can on the back end so that you're not overpaying so much into the quarterback position overall. And so that's what they did. 7th round pick, 7th round contract to pair with the $200 million deal of Tua. But that's also maybe the benefit of the Seahawks here in that you're not getting a high level backup type you're playing here. You're getting that, like you say, a little bit of that lower level guy. And that is going to make this easier where as long as you can stop the run and not make it easy on them or allow them the easy way out, you can make a long day at the office there for this offense.
Yeah. And I think that's a reasonable expectation in this game. This Miami offensive line, obviously the McDaniel scheme helps them a lot. It's not a good offensive line and they're going to get Armstead back. So at least they got that going for them, but it's an offensive line that is not radically different than ours right now, right? They're being propped up by a good left tackle, and that's it.
For the most part, I look at it and I don't see a lot there that's to be excited about and what they've built there in that line. It's okay, and it's helped a lot, Brendan, by the fact that they have a quarterback who typically gets the ball out of his hands as fast as any quarterback in football, and that is going to benefit your pass protections a lot. So when you watch that Miami team with Tua, Brendan, I mean, I don't know about you watching those games, it's distinctly different than even teams like the Niners that will be short in their passing attack and how quick they are trying to get that thing out of his hands. Like it is out, like he's just got the hot potato right out the oven and it's got fires off of it. And he's just like, and you go, boy, it's manufacturing all of that in the office. I know it works and it looks cool and kitschy, but it's also like, it sometimes seems like a lot of smoke and mirrors and not a lot of like actual tangibleness there. I know it's been a very good offense with Tua running it, and maybe this is a good little time to talk about this with their offense on this because I think there's a little bit of discussion to be had here on Tua. But where are you at with him? Everyone's got an opinion on this one. I suppose we should ask you on it too as well. Of where do you stand on this Tua thing from a couple different areas, both what goes forward now with him, and then also let's revisit a little bit of that, giving him out that contract this offseason.
Well, he's probably slightly above average as starting quarterbacks go. Like he's probably about as good as like a Baker Mayfield, I would say. Maybe Baker's moved up a little bit from that. He's, maybe a little bit behind somebody like a Brock Purdy, but kind of a similar idea overall. I think that the contract was a big mistake. I think that, that contract was the ultimate proof that quarterback is, the haves and the have-nots right now. Either you get the monster contract or you don't get anything. And it's become almost completely binary now, where either you set the market or almost set the market, or you get nothing. You get like what Jimmy Garoppolo got with the Rams this year, feels like. Or, maybe there's like a Gardner Minshew contract you can fit in the middle there. But even Minshew this year got like what, $10 million a year?
Yeah. There's still not a mid-market deal to your point on that.
Right. So I'm not terribly high on Tua. I think that last year he kind of lived life on easy street in that McDaniel offense. You've got maybe the best receivers in football. You've got one of the best offensive minds in football. And you've got that amazing running game. Like, I think that it's kind of like, life on easy street. It's like Goff. It's not too different from Jared Goff. Now, I think Goff has a little bit of a better arm than Tua probably, but it's the same idea, right? Goff has great receivers, great running game, probably the best offensive line in football. So I look at his production and I'm like, I don't really care about that much. That doesn't do much for me.
It doesn't for me as well, and I do bring it up as much not to look at another quarterback situation, of course, Brendan, but because we're going to have this talk a lot over the next couple of years, And I just say that there's more and more proof to this stuff as we have these conversations as to why it's not good to go down this automated road that so many teams do with these quarterback contracts. Because Dolphins just kind of automated it. Jaguars automated it. All these teams just keep staying in automated mode. Nobody learns their lesson. Everybody decides that it's just, you got to do it. And my opinion on it is, again, is that you should really be more fighting at every turn to do those contracts. It should have to be like you are almost drag kicking and screaming to those contracts to do it, as opposed to just running fast as you can towards it, which is to me what feels like what most teams do on these situations. They run at it. They don't contemplate it. They don't consider it much. It's just go do it and it's automatic. Like the national pundits out there that'll just sit there and say, you got to sign him. You got to sign him. What are you going to do? You let him go? Yeah, you got to sign that guy. I don't know. I think it's gotten to a brain dead city on this one.
Yeah, it is. And, going even beyond just whether or not you sign them, like look at Dak Prescott. Back in, February, Dak asked for $60 million a year. The Cowboys made him wait over 7 months, and they gave him $60 million a year. Presumably, they came back with him and were like, no. Well, how about 55? And he was just like, okay, I'll just sit here. I'll get my $60 million. I know you're going to give in. I have no incentive to even try to negotiate. And he just sat there for 7 months and got exactly what he wanted. I mean, reportedly, he was asking for $60 million from the start. I mean, what kind of a negotiation is that, where you just sit there for 7 months and get everything you wanted anyway?
Well, to your point as well, the Cowboys are known for doing this. They kind of did the same thing with CeeDee Lamb too.
Right.
You didn't save any money by doing your whole thing. It's like they do a lot of theatrical stuff, that Cowboy organization. It's like, well, look how hardline we did this. The numbers don't say hardline there, Jerry. Numbers say, you brought in, you unloaded the vault on this one is what the numbers say. Yeah.
And I mean, compare that to again, it's not a quarterback, but I feel like Schneider's done a fairly good job coming up with pretty decent deals when he does these extensions. I guess the exception would be Wilson, but Wilson, obviously, there were some external circumstances there, and he's a quarterback, so it's a little bit easier, but DK didn't set the market. DK got a smaller deal than I think Terry McLaurin did that offseason.
AJ Brown was the one you're thinking of.
Yeah,
Brown got the 25 and then he got 23 and a half after Brown signed his deal.
And I think that McLaurin might have gotten 24.
Mm-hmm.
So right. DK didn't, he didn't even try to equal the market. Obviously the Geno Smith contract, that one ended up looking really, really good in hindsight. That's a beautiful contract now, especially with the way defenses have taken over the NFL, and 30% of that contract is in statistical incentives that it's almost impossible for Geno to get to now.
John, you wily SOB.
Yeah. It's it's one of those things where it feels like John's actually negotiating. He actually gets the other guy to meet him halfway. And I mean, and that's a quarterback too. That's Geno Smith. That's not just a receiver or a tackle or anything like that. It's actually a quarterback. So I didn't really like the contract either. I kind of understand it, but honestly, I still kind of don't. I got it more with Jordan Love, right? Because I see it with Jordan Love. I could see Jordan Love being an elite quarterback. I never, ever thought that Tua would be anything more than what he is right now, which is he's not top 10. I don't think he's top 12. He's probably top 14, but how much further are we going to push this?
And if you're going to get a middle of the road quarterback, do you want to be paying top end prices? Or does that guy at that point when he's making that payment need to be elevating the cast around him versus the cast around him needs to be elevating him? Get back to those eternal questions that I think teams don't ask themselves, but should be asking themselves when it comes to contract time with these guys. When it comes to this Sunday and playing defense against this Dolphins team, and I know we're saying out the forefront, Brennan, stop the run, which is, obvious on it, but there's a thing I want to ask you on with this that came up to me with watching the Rams-Cardinals game, because what the Rams were doing was they were trotting out Kobe Turner, who's I think more 3-tech than he is a nose tackle. And then they've got Braden Fisk out there as that 3-tech as well. So they're rocking basically 2 3-techs, and then they've got their outside stand-up linebackers out there. And the Cardinals, they would see that look at times. I felt like we're checking into the run to James Conner. So you've got that stupid 2-man front stuff that we lamented for years. And then you've got James Conner coming downhill against that 2-man front on duo blocks up front. So then the Rams would counter back to a 3-4, and then the Cardinals would come back and hammer them with the passing attack. So you come into this game, as I push that forward on this a little bit, on that ebb and flow in that game of looking at this going, okay, well, on the surface you go, I'm not worried about the quarterback beating us up over the top. Let's rock the 3-4. But then you got to worry about Waddle and Hill, though, right? Because those guys are such game changers and they can score from any place on the field at any time, that then you almost have to build some protective nature in with the cover 2 shell stuff and that as well. Where would you go if you're McDonald on how you choose to attack on this? Just do you trust more in that front 4 and keep it how you've kind of kept it, which is where they've done some 3-4 looks when they know it's a rundown for sure. And they're like, this is a rundown, we'll run it out. But I mean, what would be your kind of splice between that?
Well, the personnel's a little bit different here, right? Because Byron Murphy, I know he's not a nose tackle, but he kind of brings some of the same nose tackle type qualities. C Mike Spin Move on X was posting some clips earlier, I think yesterday, about Byron Murphy. And he basically said, like, this is like Poona Ford on steroids, I think was the terminology he used. So for one, you don't have that issue that you're talking about where you have 2-3 techs out there. You have a guy who actually occupies space in the middle and is doing a really good job of being able to penetrate past double teams even. Like, I think that you're seeing Murphy regularly squeeze his way in the middle of double teams. So it's a little bit different when your personnel is a little more equipped for it. I will say that. But generally speaking, I kind of feel like in a game like this, you kind of have to take it on faith that Skylar Thompson is not going to be able to hit those passes, right? He just doesn't have the NFL arm. I actually remember a few years ago scouting him a little bit in the draft, back when Wilson was still our quarterback, because I thought we would need a cheap backup quarterback because we couldn't afford a more expensive one. And I was like, okay, let's try to find a quarterback who at least kind of plays like Wilson. And I thought Skylar was kind of sort of close for somebody you could get very late in the draft, like 6th or 7th round. But I wouldn't think that he would be able to make those throws, even if Hill and Waddle are doing their thing. So I think you kind of just say, well, if he does make those throws, then good for him. I don't want to let this dynamic Miami rushing attack beat us.
I like it, Brennan. So a little more, if you're dialing in 3-4 looks coming into this game at like a 20% rate, maybe you're dialing up 40, 45%, 50% in this game, if not more.
Yeah. And there are going to be 3rd and longs. There's going to be 3rd and 12s where you can do whatever you want. You don't have to worry about it so much. Then you can you can play those 2-man fronts.
Right.
But
absolutely.
But I would definitely try to make Skylar Thompson try to beat you. And if he does, you just say, well, this is a funny sport we play.
The question's been posed to me a little bit with this as well, and I'm agreeing with you on that, by the way, where I think I'd lean more into the 3-4. I'd come into this game saying, if he beats you over the top in this game, making those big boy throws in this environment on the road, and their pass protection can hold up against your defense that's leading the NFL in pressures without blitzing through the first 2 weeks, really, so be it. I'm much happier than that than them running the ball 39 times for 236 yards in this game. I don't want to see that on the other side of it. So I would go more 3-4 as well. The question comes back down to now, do you match up Tyreek Woolen one-on-one with Hill? Is Witherspoon the better matchup with Hill because of so much of the time that Hill operates out of the slot?
Oh, that's tough. That's hard. Maybe do you have somebody follow him? I guess you don't want Hill to isolate on Brown on someplace, right? You don't want him to just be able to follow Brown.
I think Brown's going to have a hard time. Brown's going to really good in press, of course. So you're going to have to be pressing the hell out of him with Brown to keep him stopped. And that's a way to stop Hill. You can press him off the line of scrimmage and give him problems with physicality. But if he gets around it, right? If he it's the old Looney Tunes where the guy reaches for it, then there's just nothing but the figure of what was once there. That move happens and he's by Brown. I mean, and that's also the question that comes into play. Maybe it's not that, Brendan. Maybe the answer is instead having the double team over the top with Hill on this because he is so dynamic and productive as a receiver that you go, okay, we're not going to have the travel. We'll play more legitimate side to side this week. And then we'll bracket him up wherever he is on the football field.
I feel like if you're going to have anybody follow Hill, it's probably Woolen. but I wouldn't particularly object either way. I'm just a little bit less worried about it with Thompson out there. I think you can afford to maybe not compromise your defense by following a guy if it also because he doesn't have any kind of a real quarterback to get him the ball. But if I had to pick one, I'd say you probably want Woolen following Hill, but I could see it both ways. I mean, if it's not like Hill and Waddle are radically different players, right? It's not like Hill and Waddle play completely different kinds of football where you need one type of guy covering that guy and another type of guy covering that guy.
It's true. No, it's very true. I do. I've gone back and forth with this on myself. I wonder a little bit with Woolen, though. He's got the speed about that longer build, trying to operate, let's say, in the slot with the stop and start, two-way go stuff. If he would be as well equipped to be doing that type of stuff versus Witherspoon, who's got that a little maybe more in his bag on that. But I'd like to. Waddle's still there; he's a problem. But at the end of the day, when it comes to especially trying to hit some deep routes down the football field, I'm not convinced this Dolphins offensive line is going to give Thompson the time to hold up back there to be able to get those throws off as well. Because you still need the time to get those, like the throw route, the route we had with the DK in this last game on the 9 route. That was still a throw where Geno had to give it a beat. He had to be a 7-step drop. You need that extra time in the pocket. And even then he was still this close to getting hit on the play. And so I think that you may not even do the travel stuff on it, but stop the run this game. Don't let them beat you with, the run game angle of it. It's not like the Patriots last week where you didn't let them beat you on it, but you let them hurt you a little bit with it. You're giving Jacoby the easy way out at that point because you're getting him in 3rd and shorts. You're getting him to where the play action stuff's going to work really well. And he's not having to push down the ball down the field or attack the receivers, which is his weakness. So you want to push the team into their weakness, which in this case is that backup quarterback. I believe Brendan. Geno Smith, a tight end, not super dynamic or worry about there. He's a good quality overall around tight end. And they used him a lot last week, but not a guy that's going to be a game changer. Not even a guy like dangerous like Gesicki was there for them as that tall, lanky, huge catch radius guy there. That could be a problem, especially down the red zone. They've lost that there a bit. So, not a place that's as much a threat.
Yeah. I always really liked Gesicki too. Kind of surprised he's flamed out. He's kind of flamed out. It feels like I haven't heard about him in a while. Yeah.
He was coming on. He looked like he was going to really be emerging as one of the better maybe pass catching tight ends to come along in this league here. And then just like you say, kind of just went quiet and flamed out a bit there, and odd at that. Maybe injuries coming in a bit with it. Anything else offensively you think to be aware of? I mean, a lot of misdirection here, right? A lot of pre-snap sets, and we're going to move the linemen over here, and then these linemen are going to stand up and go over here, and then this running back's going to go out here in the motion, and then this guy's going to come back after this motion. And then post-snap, everybody's going to go like this, right? It's a lot of zigzagging and around the world.
I think that pretty much covers it. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself here, and I didn't think Tua was all that great of a quarterback anyway, but when you're playing a team that is quarterbacked by somebody that isn't like a legitimate NFL quarterback, it just gets really, really hard to see what they're going to be able to do. And, if you're looking for anything, I guess you would look at a game like Green Bay played last week where they have Malik Willis. They have a quarterback that can't really throw the ball, and they find a way to run for 300 yards. That's what I'm trying to avoid. Yeah. That's what I'm trying to prevent here. That's what would concern me. Right. And if you're Indianapolis, you got to be feeling pretty stupid there because you had to know what Green Bay was going to do with Malik Willis in the game, and it just happened, and you had nothing to say about it.
Well, and the Colts look doubly dumb, right? It's both ends of the coin on that one, because not only do you not stop up the thing coming in that game that you want to step up to make it hardest on that opponent on that side of the ball, but then flip it to the other side of the ball, Brendan. Jonathan Taylor has 9 carries for like 78 yards in that game. Meanwhile, you've got Anthony Richardson throwing the ball all over the football field, 3 interceptions on his side of it in addition to that. And you guys on both sides of the ball didn't get quite the memo on this one, huh? And it's a little bit like where they're trying to validate a bit of the Richardson pick rather than go out there and win the football game. You got Jonathan Taylor. You got an offensive line that can run block for him. Get after it with that, and odd game from the Colts, I thought, from them on that. I agree on both sides, but hopefully we can take a page out of not letting them do that. And with where the running game's gone this year and team's commitment to it, you got to come into it with your heavy, hard hat on and ready to stop that. And if you do, Brendan, I agree with you. I think it's going to be hard in this offense to find, much mileage. They got to be disciplined though. They got to communicate. They can't Can't get over aggressive, I think, in this as well, because that's where McDaniel's really going to be trying to take advantage too, like trick play type stuff, where he's going to be trying to manufacture whatever he can manufacture from a coaching's angle. If he's already doing a lot of stuff, I think he'll be doing a lot of even extra stuff this week to try to help out Skyler.
Yeah, and don't be surprised if we see both quarterbacks. You might see, I know Huntley just got there, but don't be shocked if they have some kind of package in there to make sure he can do a little bit of stuff. Maybe they got like 5 plays that he can run.
Was Huntley playing against us in this preseason? Didn't he was he the Browns? Was he with the Browns there at the end?
Let me check and be sure. I actually don't remember.
I want to say that he had he actually played really good against us in the Browns game, but I could be confusing him.
Yeah, Tyler Huntley. He had 3 touchdowns. He did play pretty well.
So I do wonder, to your point on that, if you had Tyler Huntley, if McDaniel, being the smart guy he is, would go back to that preseason tape and go, oh, he did this pretty good against that defense. Bring him out for this package and have him run that play that he ran in the preseason for success.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe
be mindful of it. Be mindful. Yeah.
Be mindful. On your toes, Mike, this week, Mac. On toes. He's gonna try to get wicked with it if he can. So, well, let's go to the defensive side of the ball here, or the offensive side of the ball, I guess, defensive side of the ball for the Dolphins on this side of it. And we're going to get a time-honored matchup returned, a yearly matchup that used to be a lot of fun to go see these guys going back and forth. Both, I think there were some days 1-1, other day 1, but we're going to get the Jalen Ramsey, DK Metcalf, probably traveling, I'm guessing, with DK again from the Rams days, huh?
Yeah. It's not the same Jalen Ramsey, though, it feels like. It feels like his time as a hyper elite cornerback is pretty much over. He's still all right. I know he got that contract restructure so he could be $100,000 above Patrick Surtain. I understand that he's still a good player. I don't feel like he's the kind of guy that I'm terrified about throwing the ball at anymore. I feel like he's just another cornerback in this league. So I do have my eye on that. DK has had good games against Ramsey before, for sure. It's gone the other way previously as well. But it's not something that I look at and I go, well, I don't think DK is going to do anything into this game.
I like the thought, too, of getting Ramsey into the slot and seeing what he could do with DK in the slot. Where you've not had him prior with those two guys on that matchup before, right? It's always been on the outside with them. And now you're actually going to draw a guy like a Jalen who likes to be on that outside. It's a whole nother world coming inside, whole nother world going into that slot. Mm-hmm. And we already saw DK last week with the touchdown, taking it off that slot spot. That was one of the spots Grubb was going to build in this year. And giving DK some chances in there. So I agree. I think Jalen's definitely maybe not quite the cover man he is. He's still a very good run defender, really good tackler. That still does really show up with him, but maybe not quite, as fast as maybe he once was on that. He's gotten older. It's quite understandable, but that was the matchup that stood out to me. And when I do look at this defense, Brendan, though, they have drafted some young players that have done some good things for them. Javon Holland is, I think, one of the more underrated safeties in this league. Jalen Phillips was a guy that we liked coming out, who's coming off a major injury right now. But it's a defense, Brendan, that also is doing a thing that I always kind of have a little bit of a bristle against. It's that old rule that Mike Holmgren taught me from 20 years ago, where they asked, and I know I've told you this before, but tell me if you think that this is also what you're seeing when you look at this depth chart of this Dolphins team, is Holmgren said, the lesson I learned off when I was a GM, and then they took the GM away from me and they said, okay, Mike, what lesson did you learn from doing it that you would have changed over your time from what you did when you walked in? And he said, I walked in and I went really young offense and I went really old defense. I would have flipped it up the other way if I could have done it again. And when I look at this Dolphins defense with the Ramseys and the Calais Campbells and the Jordan Poyers, I think there's another name I'm looking at where it just more seems to be that there's some youth, but there's a lot of assembly of veterans here. And I don't know if I'll really get the plan, Brendan.
Yeah. I do think that there's a little bit of that going on there. Although Calais Campbell, his age doesn't matter. I mean, he was born a 40-year-old man. He's a 40-year-old man now. And 40 years from now, 40 years from now, he'll still be a 40-year-old man. It's fine. He doesn't count.
Yeah, it's totally true. It's a good thing is, yeah, he'll look this age, even as he's getting 50, 60, 70, he'll still stay. It's one of those guys too. That's like, well, yeah, when you're in your 20s and 30s, man, it hurts when you're looking that age. But once you're 50, 60, you still stay there though, too. So you get that lasting power there,
But it's a defense that's lost a lot from last year. My friend, who I frequently have on the call when I'm doing Twitch streams at night, is a Dolphins fan. So we talk about this all the time. They lost Christian Wilkins this offseason, right? He was their best player by probably a pretty wide margin, I would say. They lost a couple other guys as well. Jerome Baker, we know about that because he's here now.
Howard.
Yeah, Xavier Howard was another one. Almost forgot about him, but that's actually a big one too. They had a real nice 1-2 at cornerback. Now they don't. And their defense was fantastic for most of the year last year. So they depended on their defense a lot to win games. So with all that they've lost, it's hard to believe that they're going to be able to keep their heads above water this year. They do have some players that we like. I like Chop Robinson. I thought they got a pretty good pick with him. I thought Chop was a nice pick. But so far, he's not playing that much, which is not terribly surprising.
Ziegler's pretty good. Sealer, sorry. He's not great, but he's solid. The Zach Sealer, he's a defensive tackle they paid instead of Wilkins. Remember, they paid him and it's not Wilkins, and then that's how you knew that they were going to let Wilkins walk. And it was like, man, that's your guys' choice on that one, huh? But you pay that Tua contract, Brendan. You pay that $200 million. Somebody's got to go.
They wish it was $200 million. It was more than it was like 250.
Was it was 250? Oh,
yeah.
Yeah. Oh Lord.
$200 million doesn't sound so bad right now.
Oh my God, these teams, man. Oof, they're just crazy about it. Just absolutely nuts. But yeah, I think Phillips, I don't think he's got that thing going on. I think he's coming off the Achilles tear. He doesn't seem to be quite at 100%. Chop's played good for them, though. You're right. It's been in and out. I've been impressed though, because I thought he was going to be a little bit of that Will McDonald thing from last year, where he's so raw coming out of Penn State that it was going to take really a year to have anything kind of click into place on the kid. But he's picked up the slack for them, and they've needed it because they don't have Bradley Chubb,
right,
who's out this game with an injury.
Right. Yeah, he's going to miss at least the first month. So, I mean, that's a big deal. Bradley Chubb wasn't, he's certainly not an A-list pass rusher, but he's a good pass rusher, solid pass rusher. And I look at this game, and it seems like we're not going to have Walker, by the way. Let's go ahead and just say that right now. I don't think Walker's playing. I
don't think so either. I think even if he could play, I think the coaching staff looks at this game like we can get this win, whether Walker plays or not.
Right. Right. So I don't look at this game and I have any really strong inclination about, we need to do this one thing. We need to do this one thing. Like, I don't feel like, we need to run the ball for 300 yards or we need to throw the ball for 400 yards. There's nothing in this game that makes me think that any one thing is just going to completely befuddle that Miami defense. I think we just play a normal game, play a relatively balanced game. It is going to continue to be frustrating. I'm sure that the offensive line isn't going to make a cosmic jump from last week to this week. So we're still going to have to be dealing with some of that. Now you're playing at home. Now you're playing at and I'm not terribly worried about it. Like,
oh no.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good. Something's been a little bit weird with the connection, folks. Sorry about that.
Okay.
We're good though.
We're okay. I think we're okay.
Yeah. I was having issues earlier, so it's maybe me. I think I update my drivers tonight.
Yeah, people in the chat are saying, "Okay, can you guys see us?" A lot of them
I can see you now. You're good. You're good now. I think it was
okay.
Bad.
Excellent. Yeah, I don't know what that was, guys, but we are good now. Okay, so the thing about that New England game was, for the first time maybe ever, we had a game that was all about just get the ball to DK, get the ball to JSN, and it's that simple. Like, those are your two maybe most talented players on offense with Walker out. Just find a way to get the ball to them. That's what we didn't see last year that I think disappointed some people. They got the ball some. JSN didn't have any games even like half as good as the game that he had last week. And I would say that in a game like this, just keep it that simple. It's as simple as throw the ball to DK 12 times, throw the ball to JSN 12 times, and it's going to be really hard to lose.
Yeah, I think that I would agree with you. This isn't a game requiring a lot of extra to it. Staying and just continue to build on this offense and where they've been from a performative standpoint, and just stay with it. The targeting DK and JSN is a good one. I think this is a good week to recognize a bit of the fact that with no Walker in here, and that it's not all Charbonne's fault on it, but that it is what it is kind of situation, and that let's get Laviska worked in here. Let's get some of the fly sweep game worked in. I know they've worked some bubble screen stuff with DK and JSN a little bit. I'm okay with that, but let's get Laviska's got a skill set he brings to this team that's very unique. And if you're in a position needing offense at times to manufacture some stuff, especially in that gadgety guy kind of role, I think he could really help this team out with even a 40, 45, 50 yard kind of game from fly sweeps and bubble screens, just to help you out a little bit in that manner. And they haven't found that role for him yet, so far. But if there is a little bit of some tough sledding through this game, Brendan, I wouldn't mind seeing them try to maybe work a little bit of that. You do get, from a stylistic standpoint with this Dolphins defense, your defense. That's what they are running. They've gone from Fangio last year to now the McDonald, like at Weaver, I think is their DC, but comes from that Baltimore Ravens tree. So you're going to get the defense that you train against every week, all the time, a much less talented defense than probably what you get to see from Geno's standpoint, a much less talented defensive coordinator from what Geno's probably been dealing with as far as McDonald week in and week out there at practices. And so they know the means to beat this defense. Geno knows what he's got to do. Give him the control too, Brendan. I think you'd say this is good. One thing that's really nice, and you're seeing with Geno right now, and I know that they'd asked him about this, a reporter did, is Grubb giving you more control this year? And he goes, no, it's about the same, but it is a little more. It is a little more commitment. That Patriot game was a real thorough commitment to getting him up to the line of scrimmage and giving him an opportunity to really have a lot of control up there to dictate things. And I like to see more of that as well. It keeps him in kind of that flow state, it seems like, doesn't it?
Yeah. I love it. I love when he gets up to the line with 25 seconds left on the play clock. I think that's the best thing for this offense right now. And you can see, these defenses really have a hard time doing anything effectively when the offense is just going. There were moments in that Patriots game where they would have like this random stoppage in the middle of a drive, and it just felt like the air was getting let out of the balloon a little bit there. Mm-hmm. And it's probably his best asset, his understanding of the mental part of the game. He's got a good arm. He's got good accuracy. You saw in that Patriots game, by the way, he even dropped the throwing. What do they call it? Where you drop your arm angle a little bit and like side-armed it in there, which, all that kind of stuff. But I think his understanding of the mental part of football is his greatest asset. And you're letting him do that when he gets up there like that. So yeah, I absolutely love that kind of stuff. And I'd love to see it as much as possible. I know you can't do it all the time.
Yeah.
But I'd love to see it as much as possible, especially in a game like this where you're probably going to have to throw the ball a lot because it's going to be hard to run the ball when you don't have your top running back.
Yeah. Well, and it speaks to Grubb's confidence, doesn't it? That as a first-time OC, you think as a first-time OC, I would think that you walk in and you go, okay, I got to make sure it's my call. I'm getting my call in every play because I'm going to call the right call. I'm going to be brilliant. I'm going to be masterful. But instead, he sort of has let the leash, not the leash off, but the reins out a bit here with Geno on, okay, I'm going to I can trust in this guy. He's shown me he is so good and so smart on it that I don't have to be all micromanagered out on it in that way, that it has to be my call that I'm getting in. Instead, I can let him rock with it fluid. I can give him a basic understanding what he needs to do. We can give him some sideline notes. You'd see him. They'll sometimes look over the sideline a little bit where they're giving him some help, but he is controlling it. Let him have that role again and let it continue. So I just love seeing Grubb do that with that confidence, Brendan, right from the jump, because I think a lot of other guys would have been nervous and, no, if I fail, I want it to be failing on my bad play calls, not failing on the quarterback, not getting all of the perfect checks prior to the snap.
Yeah, I think there's some truth to that. And also that stuff you were saying about like the Chenault plays and some of the other plays that aren't necessarily lead to Chenault. I do think there needs to be some understanding that there are a lot of plays that an offense will run throughout a football game that are meant to set up other plays, not necessarily for that play to work. Yeah. Like DK had a couple catches in that game that went for like no yards, like no gain. Gets tackled out in the flat for no gain. And people are like, what's up with that play call? I think Lockett had a play like that too, where he caught the ball for no gain, maybe even lost a yard. And it's important to understand that those plays are there to set up other plays later in the game. They're not really there because they think they're going to get anything big out of it. So you got to continue to run those plays, and down the line, that's going to pay dividends.
Oh, and you're also, to your point, not just setting up for the game, but setting up for future opponents. Future opponents see that tape. You're aware they're looking at that tape. They're probably looking at the pre-snap read going, oh, they're going to run the out route here for a little short flat play. I can jump that. And then you run a double move off the back of it or something like that. Something Grubb's very good about is pairing together one play to the other. It's like how he'll take a trick play and then he'll run the fake off of that same trick play later in the game. He's very good at pairing together how he wants to set a defense up, I think, both in the short and the long term in that way. And he gets teams leaning to their tendencies at times. That's one way he'll break you, is get you caught leaning to a tendency, because he's not really a tendency guy when it's all said and done. But defenses want to find the tendency. That's what they're doing with the film study. They want to find that thing that they can lock into to make the game easier for them, so they're not having to read it all in the moment.
Yeah, I'm totally there. And I watched it at UW these last 2 years, so I get it. Not every play is meant to score a touchdown. I think people need to kind of understand what those plays are meant to do. They can get no yards, and the play still did its job.
I think the word McDonald might have used this last week was it probing, poking? I think was the word he used, probing or poking. They both work. He was doing both. So, Garth Knight, thank you for being a member of the Hawks Nest for 22 long months, almost 2 years there, Garth. He says, thank you. That dude Brando interviewed from Dolphins media thought highly of the Hawks in this matchup, and I think highly of their chances up here. I think highly of it as well. I had a chance to chop it up with a guy, journalist, 34 years, the Dolphins here this last week. Brennan talked to him, and I think it's good to hear he's coming around on that, at least on Twitter, and he was pretty high on the Hawks overall, and it's not super big on where they're at. So some interesting discussion there.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to be too high on you. If you're going to be objective, it's hard to be optimistic about your team when your quarterback is Skylar Thompson. Like, that's just not a winning formula. So
he hated the Tua signing too. So he was also you can imagine how that goes. If you were already a guy didn't like the Tua signing, then that happened last week.
Yeah, I think that it's hard. I think it would be hard to be a Dolphins fan that is really paying attention and like that signing. I'm sorry, but I don't think you can really be like paying attention to what's going on and be like, $250 million to Tua, handing the keys to the franchise for the next 5 years over to Tua. Sign me up. I could see some people being like okay with it, but they'd be okay with it while covering their eyes while doing it. I don't think so.
I would have worries with the deal just on what the skill set he brings to play. But you throw that injury part on top of it as that extra layer to it, and that's the no-brainer. I can't do this. It's like it'd be already I don't want to do it here with what he brings up, but then you're throwing that on top as a pretty rich injury history, not just the head too. It's the hip back in Alabama, and I don't know if I want to. That's a lot of risk on that,
Yeah. I mean, you could make an argument against any monster QB contract right now. But I think that's the one that's a little hardest to advocate for. Although maybe we're not far away from Brock Purdy making it look not so bad.
We'll see. He's going to be that next man up, and looks like he is en route to be paid. It's going to be hard for them to push that line to say that they can't do it with him when it's going to be like, look, I've outperformed Zillion, but you had 3 years of cheap 7th round contract. Pay me.
Well, he's got no Kittle, no Debo, and no McCaffrey this weekend. So maybe he'll look like a McDonald's worker. And maybe by the end of the year, he will be one. Who knows?
Problem is that Rams defense is kind of hot garbage. So, he's still probably going to put up about 250, even with those guys out, and I'm sure Shannon will probably run about 40 times this week as well. So, they'll give Mason the ball 33 times or something like that. But I like our chances as well. I'm going to be guessing Brendan's going to like our chances too on this one, Garth, this week. It's looking very good, the 3-0 potentiality of things. But thank you for your long-time support to the channel. Eric Michelet, thank you for the $5 dono, and appreciate the double donation today. Eric, glad to see you guys being successful in hopping on other podcasts. Keep up the great work. Well, thank you, Eric. I really appreciate it. It's been fun going out and doing some things. And we're in the NFC West roundtable the other night, Brendan. And oh, buddy.
Yeah, I heard about that. I haven't had a chance to watch it yet. I was actually on another podcast at the same time you were on that show.
Oh, wow. Where'd you go on?
Well, it's a pretty small one. It's called Sideline Sports. I don't know if you've heard of them. They've got a couple thousand subscribers, but it's mostly being run by Dave DeRochers. I don't know if you remember him or not,
Mm-mm.
but he was
Sounds
a
familiar, but
Seahawks offensive lineman
oh, okay.
in the 80s. He was a 12th round draft pick
Oh,
in
there you go.
1987. And
Wow.
they also have Walter Thurmond on there a lot. I think he's also the co-host.
Oh, okay.
And they
Nice.
had Joe Tafoya on there. He was the guest for this week.
No, Joe Tavoy. Oh yeah, another Seahawk,
Yeah.
former Seahawk there. Okay, sweet. No, there's sounds like a cool podcast. I'll have to check that one out.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the Rams and the Cards content creators were quite out on Geno. It was kind of wild.
Yeah.
Some of the takes I was getting. I was like, it was just my head about blew up. I almost went scanner style on him. Dude. You know, just
Yeah, some people just don't get it. Some people don't get it. But I think that, you know, if this team can get on, you know, do at least something in the playoffs this year, win a playoff game or something, people will start figuring it out, right?
I think maybe, I don't know, man. It's getting startlingly close to me on some of these folks with their opinions on this one of, you know, that they aren't really open to looking at new data, that they have had their mind set on it. It starts to get to that point where it starts to feel like that from certain camps on this one, especially when you're from guys like I heard in that podcast where they're like, yeah, we were thinking Geno's going to be benched by week 5 for Sam Howell.
Yeah. Like I said earlier this stream, Geno Smith is like the ultimate separator between the people who actually watch tape and study things and the people who don't.
Yeah.
Box
stats there, basically.
Yeah. I've seen people in my comments who are like, you know, calm down about Geno. He's only thrown 2 touchdowns this year. And it's like, okay, he's also the only quarterback in the last 3 years to have 0 inaccurate passes charted through the first 2 weeks of the season. The only one in 3 years. Yeah. You know, he's also the only guy in this league right now, I would say, really, who is stewarding good offense, or at least average offense, with terrible pass blocking in front of him. Mm-hmm. Like everyone else, every other quarterback that's stuck behind a terrible offensive line, they're not doing anything. You're getting like Daniel Jones types of results, right?
Mm-hmm. I did the look last night, Brendan, for my show of the PFF top 10 quarterbacks right now. Top 10. I looked at their pass protection units rated by PFF. Geno, 31st. Of those 10, nobody was as bad. The worst that you had was Sam Darnold at 24th, who's like 5th or something, 6th on the PFF rank board. Geno's like 3rd. But Geno, by far, when you looked at it, it was one of those like picture, you know, which of these is not like the other. Geno was the great outlier of that top 10. And it's from even going to a guy like Derek Carr, you know, he's got good pass protection this year. And all those guys you went down, they all had good pass protection, or at least middle of the road pass protection. And Geno's not had that, and not had it for a very long period of time. And again, that he's doing this, Brendan, when we know this stuff tends to accumulate. When it's been almost 2+ years of this being this battering and this bruising, and yet he is still elevating. He's still putting the team up on his back. And it's part of why we celebrate, and part of why I'm going to keep hyping him up, because that's such unusual behavior to see from a quarterback when they're dealing with those kind of issues.
Yeah, here's what I'm going to say about it. Stop playing fantasy football. Everybody, stop playing fantasy football. It has rotted your brain. That's what I'm going to say about it. I think that's a big part of it.
I think that's definitely a part that impacts it, because that what has you box stats staring more than fantasy football. Right. I think it's an ultimate truth.
Like Anthony Richardson's probably a better fantasy quarterback than Geno because of the rushing, but is Anthony Richardson even a quarterback right now? I don't know.
I'm with you. Yeah, agreed. And you got to watch the tape at the end of the day. Box stats not enough. Go get back and always watch the tape. Garth, thank you for another $5 donation. I appreciate you for that. Garth says, I want to believe in Charbazard, but he's not effective. Dude looks like Lou Ferrigno in a medium jersey, but curls are for the girls. Put in Holani. You just passed right over McIntosh, man. What about the Mac attack?
Right. Well, actually, we probably should talk about that a little bit here, because we had I think it was 70 snaps on offense against the Patriots, and Charbonnet was on the field for 67 of them. Like, one thing that we talked about this offseason was how happy we were with the running back depth, because it was Walker, Charbonnet, and then McIntosh, and then now Halani. But it's not running back depth if you don't trust one or both or two guys to ever play in the game. And I think we got to ask, what exactly is going on there? I know that they're saying, oh, it's pass protection. There are ways to get a guy like a Kenny McIntosh into the game without asking him to pass protect.
This comes back to the same thing with Laviska, right? Like if you're offensively at times having some bit of a uphill battle and finding your footing, and you've got weapons to potentially try to utilize that can give you different looks in different ways. And with a running back, sometimes just a changing to a different running back pace versus one other one can make a bit of a difference. And I agree with you. I think that if it's one thing, if Charbonnet's out there and he's running well and he's got the 20 carries and 115 yards, and why take him off the field? And I get the pass protection thing like you do, but you can work in these other guys. There is a way to creatively do it. And then you are going to throw the defense off a little bit with that. I think there's something that's gained by the defense knowing all we got to deal with is Charbonnet today. That's making it, I think, a little bit easy on the defense at that point for some of the personnel you have to make it harder on them at times with some of these playmakers that you have, especially guys like be it McIntosh or Laviska, who don't have to be in a box guys to get them touches, right? Like it's very much you can manufacture touches for these guys and then just let them go to work and see what they can do.
Yeah. There's got to be some way to get those guys involved, even if you don't trust them in pass protection. And like it worked in that game. And I do want to say this. I know that people are a little down on Charbonnet right now. I give him a lot of credit for still being effective at the end of that game after playing basically the whole game. Running backs are not supposed to do that anymore. You're not supposed to have a running back play 67 snaps. And he's still out there picking up that third down conversion in overtime, still out there grinding out, carries on that final drive. I don't know. It's not depth if you don't trust yourself to ever play it. I think McIntosh was on the field for 2 snaps in that game. So there are ways to get him out there. And as far as I know, Halani was fine in pass protection in the preseason. So I don't think you can make the argument there. Maybe he doesn't know the offense yet because he hasn't been here that long. Okay. But McIntosh, that one confuses me. If you think that you can't use him when he's been here for over a year now, then maybe he just shouldn't be here.
Well, you do wonder about what his playmaking element is you're struggling to find a way to even utilize him at all. And props to Charbonnet on that first down conversion because that was tough. He was tackled and he looked like he was down and he found a way to sort of bunny hop his way to getting that final yard to go get that first down on that conversion where he cut the ball to the backfield. But we'll see how it goes here coming forward. Maybe there's some more less uphill running. Maybe some holes start to get created in the run game as they get better acclimated here to Grubb. Maybe some of that makes a difference as well. But something to monitor, Brendan, as we go through this year with the running back situation and how they use these guys. Y2K, and thank you, Garth, for that dono. Y2K, thank you for the $5 donation. He says, I've got to counter the fantasy comment. Geno's been great in fantasy. I have him in 3 of my leagues.
I only play 1 league, and I have him too. He's my backup, though. I have Anthony Richardson, which mixed results so far.
You gotta get Geno in there, man. Gotta get though this week. You might end up getting up on him and not much. It's hard right now with the way everything's down offensively. It's hard to predict anything right now, be it fantasy or if you're laying down parlays or whatever. It's just it's tough. It's tough sledding. So how about Geno there holding it down for the fantasy leagues? Love it. Y2K.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. But my more point is the fact that people are getting caught up in like, oh, he threw this many touchdowns. Like that's such an insignificant part of the painting that these quarterbacks are putting out there that, this isn't the 1970s anymore. We don't have to just look at this tiny little box score in the newspaper every week and evaluate play based off of that.
It's a relation to baseball. It's like ERA. ERA can give you some information in general terms, but ERA in baseball is not going to give you the total of what a pitcher is when you bring in all that extra stuff, whip and loop and dupe and loops. And they got all the 50 different little acronym deals that they utilize, spin rate and all that stuff to kind of get your full real view of what that pitcher really brings to the table versus just a baseline stat that's a very not a good one for giving you precision on looking at the player. So, Geno's probably really good, but I think Brendan's point stands on people when they look at Geno doing a little bit of just look at his yards last year, yards down from the year before. He had a down year last year. No, it wasn't quite like that. No, it was. Look at the right there on the box stat. It says it. Yards are there. No, there's more to it than that. You got to.
Yeah. If my calculations are correct, the Seahawks offense is 6th in scoring so far. That's what matters. They're putting points up on the board.
That's
And
right.
it's not like Geno's riding his running game. He had no running game this last game.
No, none. And very little in the way of pass protection. It's actually even worse in pass protection compared to the run blocking so far.
Yeah.
But thank you, Y2K. Get it this year. Hope you win in all 3 of those leagues with Geno. That'd be very nice. It's always nice when you win your fantasy, Brendan, with the Seahawk. Or, you know, like a Seahawk helps you at the forefront a little. I got DK in one of my leagues, so I'm kind of rolling with that. Janeth Kumar, thank you for the $10 donation. I appreciate you for that. Janeth, hey, did the Patriots exhaust themselves with being so physical on Sunday? Why did they fail today?
I think there's a trend that you can kind of track where the road team on Thursday Night Football always underperforms, which makes sense, right? It's the short week. You have to travel. Like that's just kind of common sense when you think about it. If you've got to go on the road for a Thursday night game, you're probably in some trouble. So I think there's a little bit of that. So I guess the answer to this question is kind of yes, but also that Patriots team is just not that good. There's a couple things that they're pretty decent at, and they were able to expose some of that against the Seahawks because it was, football's a game of matchups. But yeah, there's definitely some of this in play.
Yeah, I think that there's a bit of the exhaustion. I mean, Janet, if the Patriots come out of the game with the win against the Seahawks, do they play better tonight against the Jets? Is there an element of maybe the wins getting taken out of their sails, of feeling like, well, we really are what we are? We came out of week 1 against the Bengals and we thought we were magical and we could be the Cinderella team here, but no, maybe we just, we lose at home, and no, maybe we really are. And maybe you're dipped down a little bit that next week to play the Jets versus a Jets team that is right now hungry, that's already had an early season loss this year, has a lot on the line going for it right now. I mean, everybody's got their jobs kind of on the line in that Jets organization, head coach, general manager on down. And so there is a sense of urgency there that's maybe not as much there with the Patriots. Familiarity of foe. Let's also remember this. Divisional games, if NFL games tend to be close, then divisional games tend to be extra close. Mm-hmm. And that's, kind of, a bit of what you're getting here too, I think, in addition to this. So it's a bit of all of that, I think, factoring together from my perspective, Brendan.
Yeah. There's a few different elements at play here, but trying to extrapolate things in the NFL is not going to work out well. You can't extrapolate out games based on, this game had this result, this game had that result. So if you apply extrapolated stats, this game will have that result. That's not football. Football's a game of matchups, right?
That's how you get in that circle place too, right? Where you're like, this team beats that team, so they're better than that team, but then that team loses to this team, so they're better than that team, but that team lost to the original team, so who's really better? It's that whole game. You can kind of play with that extrapolation on it, where it's week in and week out. It's always different. It's different situations, different conditions. You got to take into account. So I think it's all a bit of all that there, Janet. Good, great question though. Very good question. And thank you for that big donation. $10.
Thank you.
Mickle Cam, thank you for the $5 donation, Mickle. Says, my 2 favorite Seahawks YouTubers. Well, thank you for that. That's very kind of you to say. Do you guys think Miami will have the same game planned as New England? Backup quarterback and a great running back. Go Hawks.
Kind of. I think there's a big difference between Jacoby Brissett and Skylar Thompson, though. Like, it's 2 different kinds of quarterback.
Agreed.
Brissett, for as much as he did not play well in that game, didn't make any big mistakes either. And that's why they were able to hang around and they were able to run the ball as successfully as they were. If Jacoby Brissett made 2 big mistakes in that first half, they're down 3 scores. Maybe in that second half, they can't run the ball. So Skylar Thompson is a guy who I don't think is going to be able to keep things as clean as Jacoby did.
Yeah, I would imagine that this is going to be a little more, even potentially more of a conservative, to Brendan's point on this, Mickle Cam, conservative game plan from Miami than even what you saw from New England, which is saying something because they weren't really even trying to push the ball on the outside at all to the receivers. But I think they're going to lean on the running game. They're going to lean on a heavy amount of, I think, of the fly sweep stuff between Waddle and Hill as they can with that. A lot of the screen game, from bubble screens to just traditional running back screens, to try to keep the pass rush from pinning its ears back. So I think it's going to be very manufactured on their offense. And I know there was a lot of that from the Patriots last week too. So there is some echoes here in Mickle Cam. I just think it's like there was still some stuff with the Patriots last week of Brissett dropping back and doing some pretty traditional offensive stuff. This, to Brendan's point about Brissett being a little bit more of the higher quality backup type guy who's capable of those kind of throws and executing those kind of plays, whereas this kid can't. So that's where I go. Those plays will be removed this week, and it will be just a lot of Swiss Army knifing it from McDaniel's perspective in this one. I think it's going to be just manufacturing everything he can across the board for his QB as much as humanly possible.
Yeah, I think I imagine it's going to look like that. And the other thing is, Brissett, whatever you want to say about him, is a bigger guy. There were a lot of plays we had him dead to rights and couldn't get him on the ground. I think Skyler's like 6'1" and 205 maybe or something.
That's a good point.
So
yeah, even tonight you saw that with Brissett. Because Jets had him a couple times tonight in a grip, and there was one play where he spun around like twice. They finally called him in the grasp tonight, but he was like spun around twice where the defender just couldn't. He's one of those quarterbacks that's like that. Just they're so like Ben Roethlisberger was like that. They're just like so big, guys can almost like little brother latch on, and they can just kind of hold them up as they're sort of standing up there. He's got that, and you're right. This guy's not going to have that same ability, I don't think, with his build.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So somewhat Mickelcam, but just more extreme in the nature of running the ball, screen game, less tight end usage than what I think the Patriots did last week. You'll get a little Geno Smith, but I think it's going to be really running backs, Tyreek, Waddle, work it all the way around on that side. And thank you for the kind words as well. Appreciate the kind words on that side of it. And go Hawks, man. Garth Knight with a $5 donation. Garth, thank you for another donation yourself as well. He says, I think Charbonnet should be in Hollywood movies as a running back. He's handsome with the body of an Adonis. At the end of the day, he's a UCLA guy.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he's got those connections there, Garth.
Yeah. I just think that, if you look at him through the right context, he's perfectly capable of contributing to this team in a positive way. But like if putting him in the role that he had in that New England game, it's not going to be so great. He's not that kind of running back. He can't overcome the interior of the offensive line playing that badly.
I will say, too, the one thing that stood out to me in this game with him and using him, Brendan, was I thought there was a little bit too much scope on trying to hit the A and the B gap runs, and that you didn't try to use him at all to the edges. And then late in the game, you had that one run to the edge with him, and then he got his 9 yards. He got the best run of his day.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why not trying to they did a good job with Walker the prior week of really diversifying the rushing attack and hitting from all places on that offensive line, hitting wide, going up the middle short, hitting power. Would like to see maybe a little bit more if you're going to use Charbonnet away. Give him some more runs to the edges too, because though he's not maybe as much of that, we talked about that pure power back, he's got some juice getting him out to the edge a little bit. If you can give him a little bit of that space to work with too. He's not a sudden guy, but he can let him get to that build up speed point on like a pitch play, and he can do something with it.
Yeah, and I looked at a PFF's run chart from that game. I actually had it in a video where I was talking about it a little bit. According to them, we did not have a single run to the left side at all. Nothing. Everything was to the right. I don't know if we were running away from Keon White or what, but it was weird. Like, I could understand not doing it very often, but playing a whole game where you don't run the ball that way at all, that was weird because, say whatever you want to say. Charles Cross has actually been pretty money so far this year in run blocking.
Yeah. Oh, and you got a backup you got a backup running back. I mean, defenses are going to look at that data through the course of the game, right? Like they're going to be well aware of it in the game that you're not running to that side, and they're going to start to lean to that other edge at that point and be ahead of it. And there were times in this game, I thought in the run game, Brendan, that the Patriots did seem like they were keyed in prior to the snap where the run game was going, and that can muck up a lot of stuff and make the run game look even worse at that point when they have a little bit of that cheat step to a spot. I don't know if that'll be a place that maybe Grubb can adjust here, Brendan, but something that did jump out to me in this game. So get him a little bit more to the edges, work him out there, a little less predictable to your point on it, and going to just one side. But thank you, Garth. I appreciate the $5 donation. Maybe once he retires, he'll head back to Hollywood. You never know on that.
Maybe.
Y2K. Thank you for another $5 donation, Y2K. If it's going to be tough to run, and our O-line is at least 3 out of 5 athletic, would like to see around 5 screens. Absolutely, man.
Yeah. And I mean, you think about the running backs we're going to have in this game. Charbonnet, one of his best skills is his pass catching. His pass catching ability is one of his great strengths. Kenny McIntosh was put on this earth to catch screens, to catch passes in general. Like, that's the best way to probably use these two guys. And you look at the way this offensive line's coming together. I know Connor Williams hasn't looked that good yet, but that shouldn't really surprise anybody. Yeah, you've got a bevy of offensive linemen that can play well in space. Bradford, Connor Williams, and Cross, I would put in that category. I know Bradford's not all the way there yet, but in theory, he can play well in space because he's very athletic. So that should be enough for you to get something done in that area. And maybe it won't be everything you want it to be because you don't have Lucas, and you've got Laken Tomlinson out there, who is one of the slowest linemen in probably the entire NFL at this point. But you've got enough to find some way to make that part of your game go.
Yeah, and that's you don't have maulers anymore. That's the thing about this too, is you're going to run it at the point of attack, then you're going to try to do everything getting downhill on guys. Like, you've got this line built to screen pass and to get out in front. And some of those great blocks you mentioned of Cross that we've seen so far is him getting out into space and dirting up Cody Barton. So I'd like to see it as well. I hope he goes to that. Not as much of that, last week. They run the bubble screen game last week, but even that stuff, as Brendan said, on a couple of those throws, they were just sort of show me throws, kind of probing kind of throws, not necessarily a purposeful, we're going to attack with this screen throw here. And there's some room for that, I think, in this offense right now.
Yeah, and it feels like our receivers aren't blocking very well so far this year. It feels like that's got to get tightened up. That seems more like an execution thing. But I do feel like we need to start seeing something a little bit better from them when they're trying to block in space. Like, DK's picked up some penalties. Lockett's not a blocker, just generally speaking. JSN, it's been not so great, I feel like. So the execution has to improve on that front, I feel like.
Yeah, agreed. They've definitely not held up their end of the bargain this year as well as they did in that last year, I think, so far. So that's a place they can improve on that. That'll help those bubble screens out, especially tremendously, if because the receiver is basically the point of attack blocker. The ball's coming right behind their back. They've got to get that block laid in. And if you lose it, the play's done before it goes anywhere. So, yeah, I like where you're coming from with that Y2K. I think that's a good strat to build into this. And just another place you can bring in LaVishka on this one if you're looking to find a guy to get more of that kind of Yakian kind of approach to what he's trying to do out there. I think we've touched on a lot of this defense, but we have left out one true spot, Brendan, that in this Miami defense we've got to touch upon. That is I would call startling vulnerability, if I have to put it in a way. And this is one that we're well acquainted with, and one that I'd like to know from your perspective how you might attack this point. I've got my ideas on it, but maybe where you'd be with it on it. And that is Jordan Brooks is the starting inside linebacker who took over for Jerome Baker there with the Miami Dolphins, and a guy that we understand very well. He's having a good year for them now. He's playing well for them. Mm-hmm. But even last week, you saw him in coverage on that game on primetime where he's running down the field and he's technically in a good position, quote unquote, but he's not looking back for the ball. He's doing that move where he just runs up into the chest of the guy and then puts his arm out, never looks back, and hopefully it'll get called for a PI move. We got to attack this guy, though, in coverage, do we not? We've got to make it a part of the approach in this passing attack.
Yeah, and this is going to be a really interesting week because, there are people out there. There are Seahawks guys on X who swear by Jordan Brooks, who swear that he's a top 3 cover linebacker in this league. So this is going to be a very interesting week. We're going to, whatever happens, it's going to be explosive, right? Now we got to take him on. Mm-hmm. So definitely interested to see how that plays out. But I mean, Noah Fant's been quiet so far this year. He had maybe his worst game as a Seahawk last week, dropping 2 passes. And look, Noah Fant, we haven't seen it that much so far this year, but his claim to fame, he's a great athlete. He's a great athlete at the tight end position. He set the combine on fire 5 years ago when he was there. Mm-hmm. So you've got to look at a matchup like that and then go, yeah, let's go get that. Let's attack that. Let's try to go after this particular weakness because we have a tight end who can do it. That's why we gave him all that money, right? We paid him a lot of money to come in here and provide that threat that we couldn't have gotten anywhere else because other tight ends weren't really available in free agency, and we didn't really have the guys in the draft that we would have needed to go after at that point. So yeah, I'm for that as well. Obviously, I don't want to take away from what we'll be looking to do with our tight ends. I'm sorry, our wide receivers, because that is the strength of the team. But yeah, absolutely.
Well, I think there's ways too with the wide receiver you could attack it where you've got DK in the slot and maybe they're going to zone moments and or just any of your JSNs in the slot and you run him into Jordan Brooks territory and you run a flood zone concept through because that's something that we know just he always struggled with here is the flood zone concept. He's going to pick up the first guy who comes through his zone and he's going to vacate his area and leave the door open on his way out the door. So then you've got a wide open behind him if you can run that kind of concept in a game like that. So I would be targeting like hell in that manner in this way. I'd be targeting him in the misdirection stuff because Jordan wants to be very aggressive going one direction. And so you can catch him back the other direction with it. So I would try to get him false stepping in the wrong direction on a play and get him a lot of eye candy and going that direction. And then the third part of this, Brendan, scraping down to the second level and getting those second level blockers on him. Because we saw with him on a couple of years there where if you get a guy on a hat on him, he runs free. He can be a problem in the run game as a run defender and can tackle well. But if you can get a hat on him as a second level defender like a Connor Williams, there could be some pretty big holes there for you in the run game to go take advantage of.
Sure. Sounds like a plan to me. And this is a game where, you take out all the X's and O's. I'll say this. I think Miami's defense is going to really have 110% effort here because they know they don't have their quarterback. They know they're not going to have much on offense. So they're going to have to do something over the top to have any chance of winning. So finding these little areas to exploit, like you're talking about with Jordan Brooks. Yeah, it's going to be very important because you might not be able to beat them on effort alone because they might out effort you.
Yeah. I love the point. It's misdirection. I come back to Brendan. These defenses they're struggling from maybe having the talent guys that can just win one-on-one. They're going to try to make sure they rally the ball, that they get to the spot as humanly fast as possible. But the key on that is that then the misdirection stuff works all that much better because they're flowing so hard to that first stop from a team defensive concept that's where you get them on the other back side of things. And we talked about it going in the Patriots game, but wouldn't you say wasn't a lot of misdirection in that game against that Patriots team that was doing the same kind of thing, was there?
I would tend to agree. I do wonder if maybe that's just like they feel like they need to crawl before they can walk or something because they're not really doing the basics all that well in some areas. Maybe they feel like we can't even get to that stuff because we can't even do the directions, the straightforward stuff. How are we going to do misdirection? I think that's probably part of it. But yeah, that's something that you would hope would come later in the season once they get their sea legs.
Yeah, hopefully so. And I think that's certainly when it comes to trick plays, that's a big part of why you haven't been seeing more of them trick plays too. For that reasoning, but we'll see if this week they do a little bit more of that. Long live the king. Thank you for the $5 donation. Long live the king. Says we've been out coaching some of our weaknesses. Do you guys think that by midseason, this will be viewed as the best whole coaching staff in the league? Ooh.
Let me think here. Because, I've kind of felt like McVay's been the best coach in the league for a little while, but I don't think he's going to be winning any accolades this year. It's not going to be a good year for him. And I even made a video where I talked about this. Is this going to be the season that chases him to Amazon? Because Stafford might retire at the end of the year. Maybe he's just like, I don't want to go through a rebuild. I don't want to try to find another quarterback. I already had to sell the farm to get this one.
I think it's a good question. I'm in the same mindset of wondering off of it. The part of me I've wondered with this is a bit of, it's almost like the second that Donald sort of retires that, it's starting to drift down this direction anyway. And so if you're going to stay, are you not then committing to the process to get back to the mountaintop a bit, because there was an opening window here a little bit for you going out this season and being a contender, but it was a very narrow window. It wasn't like you were a juggernaut, like when you were going and winning your Super Bowl before with the squad you had, a great offensive line and this and that, and you don't have that as much. So I feel like he's done some of that math already, Brendan. But with that said, we know that Amazon deal's sitting there. We know that there's always a, $50, $60, $70 million deal he's probably got sitting on the table to go be a commentator at any given time. And he can always come back and be a coach. You can always go to the commentating booth and then end up coming back if you wanted to as well. Not like once you leave, you have to stay lost. But best coach in the league, I think it's going to be hard to attain that through a half a season spot, King. I think that's probably going to be a little early. I think they can be viewed as one of the stronger oncoming staffs in the sport. But there'll be still your Andy Reid's out there with the Chiefs is definitely going to be held in really high measure this year.
Maybe Dan Campbell, although Detroit's not off to a great start.
Yeah, maybe not Dan Campbell, LaFleur. though. Certainly, I think if he can weather the storm with Jordan Love's injury, he'll get a lot of props for that, and rightfully so. He
Yeah.
should get the props for that on that.
I mean,
Harbaugh.
yeah, I mean, honestly, I kind of came out of that Patriots game, and I don't know if you agree with this or not. I kind of felt like McDonald got out coached a little bit, and we won because we have a better team. And I think McDonald even kind of admitted that in the post game. He was like, I was beating myself up on the flight home because I felt like I really got tricked with the run game. I felt like it was very, very obvious that the Patriots were going to come out and throw a lot of stick routes to their tight ends, because that's what Brissett did when he was with the Browns last year when he played against McDonald's defense, and they did that, and they didn't seem ready for it. I think you can make an argument that actually that game was more about the out-talenting the Patriots rather than out-coaching the Patriots.
I think that's a fair way to put it, because I think your talent level is widely different from them on that side of it, to your point of it. So I think that's very fair, a very fair outlook, for it. So, there is something maybe to that a little bit. And that's part of finding yourself as a new coach, especially with the new personnel that you have here versus what you had with the Ravens, back last year. So we'll see. We'll see if we get the props on that, King. But I think you got a great staff put together, including, let's not forget, like Leslie Frazier on the top of this is your great kind of grandfatherly overseer of it all, and being able to, really help out, I think, fill in the blanks a little bit for McDonald at times. So they'll at least be considered one of the strongest ones, and that's all you can ask for. It's let's put one of the strongest coaching staffs we can together, along with having some of the best talent, along with one of the best general managers. And maybe that's a team that can forge its way to becoming a contender once again. I think there's a good chance of that.
Right.
Garth Knight, thank you for the $5 donation. I appreciate you for all your support today, Garth. Fellas, what has become of Bryce Young? Frankly, I never thought much of him, but when he went number 1 overall, I assumed I was missing something. Patrick Mahomes minus 3 inches, Brendan.
And those 3 inches are really, really important, aren't they? That matters a lot.
In football, that's the equivalent of 3 feet, basically.
I'll tell you, in the last several days, I've actually gotten I've seen a lot of stuff of Seahawks fans saying we should trade for Bryce Young. I've seen that stuff of this. You could make a very good argument that he's the biggest bust in NFL history right now. I know it's a little early. I'm not going to say that yet, but Jamarcus Russell had better numbers than this. Ryan Leaf, I think, had a better highlight reel, at least, than Bryce Young. I don't know if the numbers were better. Ryan Leaf's numbers were really, really bad, but that was also in the 90s. This is now. It's much easier to throw the ball now than it was in the 90s. So I wasn't a fan during the draft. When I did my big board, I had him in the 20s. A lot of people told me I didn't know what the hell I was talking about, but I was like, I don't get it. I don't understand the appeal here. I don't know why anybody would want this. And I do believe that he'd be pretty much generational if he was 6'5" and doing all the things that he's doing now. So it really is that simple. It all comes down to that. But he can't do anything about that. He can't grow taller. He can't suddenly become 6'5". He can't even become 6'1" or 6'2". So I think he's a bust. I think he's bad, and I don't think there's anything anybody can do about it.
I do, for the most part, agree with you. I think that there is some, even if you had him at 6'5" with where he'd be at 6'5", I think the arm limit, if his arm stayed at the same place from a velocity and ability to push the ball up the field standpoint, that was another thing that I didn't understand, is you have an undersized guy who's very thin, who also doesn't have a really strong arm, that you're taking number 1 overall. And he's not super pinpoint accuracy. His accuracy is good coming out, but it's not some next level elite thing that you pointed to. So you go, how does this going to work at the NFL level when you put all of that together? And these quarterbacks, I lamented it for years when we looked at him over and over. We've looked at so many, from Matt Corral's to Bryce Young's to Malik Willis's, and just, I don't want undersized quarterbacks. I don't want guys that are sub 6 foot tall that can't look over the line of scrimmage. It's too much of a detriment. It holds them back too much. They have to overcome then by being great outside of basically the hash marks and hitting those deep throws. They have to almost be perfect to make it work, rather than just get the guy that can look over the line of scrimmage and hit those middle of the field throws. So this was one that I could see coming too. I was in the same place you were on with him. We're back in first round, maybe here to even drifting in the second round. I did not get it with him as well. And I could see where this wasn't going to hold up. And let's face it too, Brendan, he could be out there even still doing well right now. And if I still think there's a question mark about whether or not his build, even if he was performing well, could hold up, if he could sustain without getting injured. Because I think if you put him out there for a long period, you're going to find him getting injured quite a bit with that 100 and what I think is about 185-pound build is what I think about is what he weighs.
Yeah, it really is one of those guys who makes you think, what are we doing? Like as we're paying these scouts and these talent evaluators millions of dollars, maybe tens or hundreds of millions of dollars a year if you take them all together. And this guy was the consensus number one pick. Like everyone gets on the Panthers for picking him at number one. Everybody would have picked him at number one, I think. Maybe a few teams would have taken Stroud, maybe. But I remember going into that draft. I remember going into draft day, everybody was like, Bryce Young, Bryce Young, Bryce Young. He's the number one guy. And he's never looked good for even a moment. Like, I can't think of a moment where I was like, oh, here comes Bryce Young. He's showing that talent. He had a good game. I don't think he's had a single good game. And I know
I don't believe so either.
But it's like Evan Neal. It's the same thing with Evan Neal too. Like how did this guy get through the cracks? How did this guy slip through to where people thought he was good? He's never looked good once at one point in his career. Ryan Leaf flashed every now and then.
Yeah. Well, and in Ryan Leaf's case, you drafted him as a guy who had the productivity coming out of college, right? He wasn't a flash in the pan. He took Wazoo to the Rose Bowl at a time when that meant something. That wasn't like Rose Bowl was like, that was like, no, that's a big deal. And he had an insane physical skill set for his time. He was monstrously large. He was basically Roethlisberger before Roethlisberger from a physical skill set standpoint. And that runs counter to a Bryce Young who's not checking any of those boxes from a physical skill set standpoint. And I don't know with you, but I do say this, Brendan, we see it on a yearly basis when it comes to quarterbacks. That's the thing about this Bryce Young. This is the most extreme example to your point on maybe the biggest, maybe this is the most extreme example, but this is just another in a line of a chain of guys we've seen like this drafted recently that people just overlook the negatives on it and they get only caught up on the positives. And it's like, you got to balance both of those things out, especially when the negatives are weighing so heavily in what they're bringing to the table on it.
Yeah. Again, it just makes you wonder, how did these people not see this coming? Like, now that you're looking at it, it seems so obvious. Of course, this guy isn't an NFL quarterback. He's not.
Couldn't you say the same thing about Zach Wilson, though, too? Taking number 2 overall, I think, in that draft.
Well, it was the previous draft. I actually liked Wilson because I thought he had a big arm. I thought he was like a mini Josh Allen. Unfortunately, mini Josh Allen, as it turns out, there's a problem there.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and I thought with Zach, the same thing. Just people got carried away through they get carried away through the pre-draft process, and it just starts swinging them in direction the further you get away from the tape, in the wrong direction, in my opinion. That's where it's more come back to the original tape and that original thought when you looked at him, and that'll guide you to the right land on the evaluation. But there's always guys that get overinflated every year. Is my point, is that we got to always be aware of this because it's going to happen this year again. It's going to be 2 or 3 quarterbacks, and you just got to be the team that avoids that overinflated, hyped up big bag of hot air that's not going to get you anything.
Yeah. But it's like, Anthony Richardson may be terrible in the NFL. He might never figure it out very easily, but I'll never doubt why he went number 4 overall.
Sure.
That's easy to figure out.
Yeah.
That's very
100%.
easy to understand that.
Yeah.
Even if he is a complete train wreck for the rest of his career and he's selling car insurance in 3 years, I'll totally get it. With Bryce Young, it was like, I don't understand how this happened. Like, this seemed very clear, right?
100%. I felt that way too with Baker Mayfield as well. Not that Baker Mayfield hasn't carved out a decent career and a workable quarterback in this league, but to go number 1 overall with his skill set coming out, I thought that was also another one where it's like, you could see that one being the poor choice in that manner of things, in that you want the upside. That's where you're really driving it. You're wanting upside in the quarterback when you're taking him over in that spot. And when you're looking at these heavy amount of limitations, you're looking at a limited upside with it. And nobody wants to be taking their quarterback in the top 10, top 5, top 1 with limitations walking the door. I want the whole deal. I want it supersized, Brendan. I want the extra large cup. I want the fries that are like this. I want it all.
which is why I have been so against planning on taking the quarterback of the future in this upcoming draft. I don't see the upside from anybody at this point. Like, I'm looking at Carson Beck. I mean, it's a little better than I thought, but I'm still not really. I don't know why this guy deserves to be in the top 5 pick.
No,
He reminds me more of Matt Hasselbeck than anything else, right? He's just kind of that kind of quarterback, maybe.
and not even having Matt's, I think, arm strength. And I don't think Matt had a huge amount of arm strength, but I don't think even that. I would look at Beck, and I think everything in that game is built on them getting that ball out of his hands as fast as possible. And then him being accurate and him throwing with great anticipation to a spot. Like, he's really good at that, but you can see the arm limitations are there. And again, do you want to go in the first round and take a guy at quarterback position that walked in the door? You're dealing with arm limitations, no matter the quick release and the accuracy and doesn't have the arm strength.
Yeah. And I don't know about Shedeur. I go back and forth on him, but there are definitely
I'm out.
moments. There are moments where he doesn't look like an NFL quarterback. He looks like a college quarterback.
He's throwing his offensive line under the bus. He's walking in with Deion Sanders. There's just every vibe coming out of this situation with Shedeur, to me, is saying at this point, let somebody else make that mistake.
Yeah.
And I think he has got, I think he's got top 5, top 10 worthy talent as far as from a quarterback physical ability and profile and size. He brings it all to the table. But I think I really worry with watching him on that. I haven't seen many quarterbacks in college throw their offensive lines under the bus to the media in my lifetime. Mm-hmm. That's not a small faux pas. That's going to be something that, quite frankly, I think that almost that moment alone is going to have him have a Lamar Jackson-like fall through the first round.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Lamar fell partly because he had his mom's as an agent, right? Didn't have a great pro day. I think Shedeur had a great pro day, but I think the whole Deion's your dad, and I think Deion's going to quit Colorado the second that Shedeur leaves. And so it's like, he's going to be right there with him the whole way here, helicoptering away, right? Helicopter coaching away with you on your stuff.
Well, I was wondering if Dallas was going to take Shedeur and then they'd fire McCarthy and hire Deion as head coach, 3-ring circus. But now they can't do that. That's off the table, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know where he goes. Because I do think that drift and drop will happen to a degree, but I don't want any part of it with what I've seen from him. And he had another cut up here after the game where a guy was trying to go up and, shake his hand. He's like, I saw you on what you said on Instagram. You can't have with me. It's like, he's just got this whole air of attitude to it. It's like, I don't want to sign up for that. That's going to be a pain in the butt. And you're going to have to manage it and deal with it. And it's hard enough training the kids and getting them right and getting them playing great.
Yeah. And everybody loves Cam Ward. I get it. Right. But he doesn't have like that upper level arm. I like what he can do, like throwing off platform. I like what he can do in terms of shifting like his throwing platform and throwing it sidearm and stuff. It's nice, but he doesn't have, I don't think, an upper level NFL arm in terms of like being able to throw the ball 60 yards down the field. And, I can't spend a top 5 pick on a guy like that.
No, you keep coming back to, if you get late second round or third round, Cam would be, maybe that guy that they could get as a reasonable facsimile for the old Russell Wilson type quarterback at that point. A guy that started 3 years at college level, played at a couple different programs, playing his best ball in that final year. I think his arms, I would agree, it's not like super elite. I think it is above average from what you get from most prospects overall, combined with some of those other things he brings to the table. But I'm with you. I think I don't want to do that in the first round. I want to do that into the second or third round if I made that pick.
Yeah, I just look at these quarterbacks and I think, can we wait for Arch Manning? Like, like.
Do you think the Mannings would let Arch come to Seattle?
Well, I don't think we're going to be in position to draft him.
But to answer that question, let's just say you package picks. The Mannings pull some.
Why not?
Hey,
it's a good organization. It's done a lot more winning than losing lately. I mean, I understand they won't let him go to Carolina. I'm sure they wouldn't let him go anywhere near Carolina, but Arch Manning's already better than Quinn Ewers. He goes out there in relief of Quinn Ewers, and immediately you're like, okay, I can see why everybody in the media went to Arch Manning at the playoff game, and Quinn Ewers was just sitting there by himself on the side.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like so much better. It's not even close.
Did you notice how Ewers had another in that game before he went down to the injury? He had another one of those boneheaded throws for a pick over the top where you just go, where are you throwing that ball, Quinn? Well, you're supposed to be a third-year starter here. Why are you throwing? Is a throw out just a leaking throw out to the flat, and he overthrows the guy 10 feet to the other dude. And he has like those throws once a game. And there's so much manufactured throws from when that Texas offense that are easy peasy on the pop, pass, bubble screen throws and behind the line of scrimmage stuff that it really gets stuck with me on him when I watch him play on that decision making and those in that interception stuff. I don't, man. Let Ewers go to Carolina, man. Let Carolina now make that. They'll come back and take a quarterback again, and like they'll solve us all on that one. But I am going to be interested to see what the Mannings do, man, because they swung that power 20 years ago before Peyton won both of his Super Bowls and before Eli had won both of his Super Bowls. That was just on the back of old Arch Manning, the father, really saying no, he's not going to San Diego. How much power do you think they're going to swing once the youngest Manning comes out a couple years now knowing the power that they do wield in the league collectively?
I mean, look, the Chargers had never won anything. They were, the small of the small markets. That's not the case with Seattle. It's not the biggest of the big markets, right? But neither was Indianapolis. Indianapolis is like, Midwest personified.
True.
Right? They probably
Very
still
true.
got people out there with like flip phones and
Nokias.
They got a bunch of people out. 90% of that population of Indianapolis probably still uses flip phones, and it worked out fine. So if we were in position to do it, if anything, I think the only way it happens, and I'm not saying it's likely, but the only way it happens would be if you had a team like Carolina, number 1 overall, and Arch is like, okay, I'm not going to there. Forget about it. I'll go play baseball first. And then Carolina trades him to Seattle, or, they're going to have to trade him somewhere at that point. So that's how it could happen. And I think if that were the circumstance, like, let's say Arch Manning has the opportunity to go to the Giants with the state that franchise is in right now. Do you think he'd go there? I know it's a big market, but would you rather go there with that disaster of an owner and disaster of a franchise that's been terrible for 10 years? Or would you rather go to Seattle?
I think Giants are my front runner for Arches. I could see where you're making a fine argument. Don't get me wrong. I do think there's a fascination with East Coast from the Manning family. I think that's a bit of a part of this for me, is I think that they want to be on that East Coast side, or at least Midwest to East Coast. But maybe they do just measure it in the way you say, that it's about what's the high quality franchise you're going to go to that's going to develop them right, that's got a stable situation, that spends money. But I do wonder with the Giants, as you mentioned them, man, they're looking like a tire fire here now and into the future. You're probably firing Dable after this year. You got to get off from under that Daniel Jones contract. You don't have a lot of talent. That's the team to me that looks like, and Eli could kind of come in and go, look, no, I know it's bad now. It was bad when I came in, but you'll come in, you'll steady the ship. They do a little bit of that. It is a big market. They do spend money, but it's a good point. They're not in a good spot.
I mean, when Eli Manning went to the Giants, they had been to the Super Bowl like 4 years prior, and they had one of the best owners in the league, Wellington. Now they got John Mara, who's terrible. I think he's low key a bottom 3 owner in the sport. Like, I think it would be very, very short-sighted to be like, oh, I want to go play in New York. No, it's a terrible organization right now, and it's been terrible for more than a decade.
It's fair. It's a fair point. And the Mannings can do kind of, I think, what they want to do on that. Like I said, because that power that I think that they do wield, Brendan, where if they want to choose to take it that direction, then so be it. They can push, in the NFL will, I think, acquiesce to whatever they do want to do with that, especially since they did it 20 years ago. Garth Knight, thank you for another $5 donation. Garth, I appreciate that support. If it still exists, I want the Hawks to take a quarterback of the future in the supplemental draft, a la Kelly Stauffer. Yeah, Hawks went kind of hell. The Hawks went a little deep with the supplemental in the 80s, Brendan. It was a wild time. There's a lot of cocaine flying about. You know what I mean? No. We're going to get our linebacker in the first round of supplemental. I'm telling you. No. That's how we're going to do it. And then we're getting our quarterback next year in the supplemental, and then we can just not have to draft him in the regular draft. Yeah. I think it went something like that, Brendan. It's my only explanation for what we were doing.
Yeah, I remember like 15 years ago, there was a quarterback, I think he played for Oklahoma at one point, who ended up getting in trouble and ended up going in the supplemental draft. And I actually was kind of like, yeah, I'd go after that guy. That guy's an idiot, but if he gets his head screwed on straight, that should be a first-round pick. I'm trying to remember who it was. I know he played for Oklahoma for like a year at least, and then ended up kind of bouncing around college football until he ended up in the supplemental draft, but I cannot remember his name.
Josh Gordon's another one.
Yeah.
recently went. Didn't Josh go in the supplemental draft?
Yes, he was. I'm looking at the list though, man. It's like Terrell Pryor. I'm looking for the success stories, right?
Well, they've had even recently that it's not even happened on I think a year or two in NFL where they didn't even have a supplemental draft active because there wasn't guys out. So there's been less guys moving into the supplemental. Part of what's driven that though is the fact that the consultations that the players do about their draft status and that type of stuff gets players better understanding about what the time of the year is to come out. And there's less of that getting caught in between, which is what the supplemental guys would be like. Well, I don't think I'm ready for the draft. Oh, I don't want to go back for another year. Oh, I'll do this late. There's more of, I think, a thought process that's not as reactionary from the prospects in coming out like that because it's just not in their benefit to do the supplemental. It doesn't work in their favor, as Brendan just showed out there with some of the history of those guys. So, but yeah, Kelly Stauffer was one and Brian Bosworth was one because you get your picks snuffed out the next year, Brendan, if you do that there. You put a first round pick on a Kelly Stauffer and a supplemental. Well, you're losing your first round pick the next year. It's the way that works. Yeah. You better be sure.
Another all-timer, Dave Brown. Dave Brown, remember him from Duke?
Dave Brown.
He went to the Giants. They used their first round pick on him. Another Duke quarterback goes to the Giants and is stinky. You think they learn. You think they'd learn, but no, they don't.
They get their fascinations, man. They do. They get their fascinations with they like those like super smart schools, maybe. You need a quarterback who's a brainiac, man. That's what you need.
Yeah.
Isn't that what we say about Daniel Jones at every turn?
It sure is. And the thing is, he's the opposite. He's actually got some nice tools, but his brain don't work. He's the opposite.
It's true. Yeah, the processing ain't there. He's got everything you need, just doesn't have the neck up stuff. It's completely true, man. Thank you, though, Garth, for all of your support tonight, man. Tons of donos in the chat. I appreciate you for that. Kasra Solari, thank you for the $5 donation. Says, I saw you on the round table, Brandon. The way they talked about Geno was making me so mad. They were so out of touch with reality. It was all I could do to contain myself. I'm in there coming in for the first time, so I'm trying to be nice and not come in there just, swinging sticks around and up throwing furniture over and breaking glasses. But I'm listening to what they're saying, and we see Geno being benched by week 5 and saying, I don't think he's that good. And I tried to check one and all of them on it and try to do it just cogently without getting too emotional on it. But I'm at that point of it where it's like when they speak this way, where if you don't want to say that you don't think Geno's elite, I'm with it. I'm okay with that. But if you're going to go be at this point now saying that Geno's bad, that's what you're operating under your opinion, that's what you've seen from him in these past 2 years, that he's bad, well, then that's where we're going to have a fight. There's going to be a discussion here at hand. I'm okay if you don't want to come all the way with me on the top 10 elite, as Brendan said, sort of scratching on the edge of elite here. If you don't go that with me, I can, that's fair about approach. You don't have to agree with that, but bad, give me a break. It was ridiculous.
Winning record over the last 2 years. Yeah.
Yeah. With nothing working in his favor, but they didn't have anything to back it up, Brendan. It's a lot of that, gut instinct thing you'll see out there at times in sports where it's like, I just kind of feel it's this way. Mm-hmm. So it's that way. Well, what do you back that up with? I don't have anything to back it up. I just kind of feel it's that way. Okay. Yeah. So you got nothing to no legs to stand on in your argument then, which they didn't.
I mean, arguments among people talking about sports is very marketable these days. So, it's probably better you go in there and have stuff to yell at each other about. It's probably going to draw more attention.
That's true. That is true.
That's like all sports radio, right?
It pretty much is. Yeah. Well, certainly that's the model you got with your ESPNs too and all that stuff, right? Mm-hmm. With their just everybody yell at each other and nobody, actually try to get in and break things down a little bit. It just becomes like who can yell the loudest, who can be more pervasive in their tone and whatever. And no, it's have something to back it up. But they did have a lot of responses to the things I threw at them on some of the things. I'd ask them questions on things and they were just like, they couldn't really respond back to it. It's like, what quarterback would have flourished in this environment? I asked that one twice, Brendan. My old question I'd ask, this is my favorite one, is, okay, take the Hawks the past 2 years because Geno's bad. Gotcha. Geno's bad. Gotcha. Who's the quarterback in the sport that does succeed in this environment over the past 2 years? Dead silence. I come back, I wait, I ask 3 minutes later. Okay, guys, nobody answered the question, so I guess it was a good question. Who's the quarterback who would have come in this environment over the past 3 years and succeeded? Again, not a response given. And that tells the silence on that speaks volumes to the fact that they haven't thought about it like that. That's why they don't have an answer. It's like, oh, well, when I think of it like that, no quarterbacks would in that environment. So,
Oh, I mean, the only answer you could possibly give is Joe Burrow because he made the Super Bowl with a terrible offensive line and mediocre. I would say mediocre coaching. So if he did it there, maybe he could do it here. But that's it. Like you at least cannot back up any claims to the contrary with evidence. You can theorize that Mahomes would be fine with mediocre coaching, but there's no proof of it.
That's right. 100%. 100%.
Yeah.
And you haven't seen him in that environment yet. So until you see it, you don't really know on that. We've learned that with all quarterbacks. And it's back to that supporting cast thing, Brendan, the deeper conversation at play. It's the thing that I think kind of looms over the whole sport right now and all these fan bases is how to view quarterbacks, how to assess quarterbacks, how much they matter, how much should they be paid. And because it affects so much else, everything else runs off of it, it seems like, rather than being just a segment of the team. It's like everything's coming off of this.
Yeah. Like, I know that the NFC West Roundtable had Norbcam on it previously before you were on it. And I don't think he's the biggest Geno guy either. So I think they were kind of used to just being able to say that kind of stuff and have no pushback.
Yeah, no, I definitely got the impression that they were running a little bit roughshod in there. And I'd been warned by my chat on it going in there. So I'll admit I walked in there going, if I do hear this, I'm going to have this pre-chambered and loaded. And the safety is going to be off, and not that, again, I'm trying to convince them that he's elite. If you don't want to think that, don't think that, but don't miss me with the he's bad stuff. Miss me with the he is what he is. Miss me with the he is something that doesn't mean anything and you don't have anything to back it up with. I'm done with those kind of empty arguments with it because it leads nowhere and it's empty-headed, quite frankly, when people talk about like that. Do better. If you're going to have a strong opinion about something, at least back it up with something, or then just say, I don't have a strong opinion about it. I don't think one way or another about the guy, but that's something they'll say. It's like, no, I don't think he's good.
Yeah.
I think he's not a good quarterback.
Next time you go on, you got to take it to the next level. You got to come in there ready with like the Don LaGreca rant ready to go, where you just start screaming and punching your microphone and standing up and putting your chair on your head.
Oh yeah. No, I'm gonna keep at him with it, Brendan, because I'm not gonna let him slide off because I think they have got a little bit of a pass there. Norm's a nice guy, and so I've got a little more a-hole to me where I'll put a little bit out there on that, and I'll be like, no, you guys aren't gonna be able to just say out of pocket stuff and expect me to just sit over here with a smile on my face and be like, that was dumb. I'm like, no, I'm gonna call it out for what it is. So he had some wild stuff too, Brendan. He was like, no, it was okay that Aaron Donald retired because we'd really been building that whole defense around him. That was really like, it was really like the whole defense was built around him. So it's like, now we can kind of just, everybody can kind of like, dude, really?
I mean, this was like 2 days ago, right? Did he see the Cardinals game? Did he watch that game? Like 41 points. That's
well, and he hit me with this. He hit me with this one on the Ernest Jones one because I came back at him after the Geno game. Like, why do you Rams fans all think you're going to be not only miss a beat, but you're going to be better? You lose Aaron Donald, generational defensive player, and the Ernest Jones trade. And he hit me with on the Ernest Jones trade. And he's like, well, I've got background information on the Ernest Jones thing. So all like, well, still doesn't change the fact you're losing 2 of your 3 best defensive players from the prior year, though, right? Well, yeah, but we drafted Jared Verse and Brandon Fisk. So I don't think you're hearing the words that I'm saying. But that's copium too, I think. And when he looks back on it in that Rams team at the end, they'll go, wow, that impact of Donald hurts bad. Yeah. And if Donald announced tomorrow that he was coming back, they'd be jumping up on their chairs, throwing confetti around the room.
He's been eating potato chips for the last few months. He's like 370 now. He wouldn't get in shape in time for the season. Let's be real.
I hope to God not. I'm glad that the Rams are starting out 0-3. That's all I'm going to say, Brendan. We're starting out 3-0. You know what I'm saying? He's like 3-0, and he's like, well, I don't know, 3-0. But we're 0-3, like, yeah, time was right, babe. Time was right. Yeah. Taker 610, thank you for the $5 donation. I appreciate you for that. The Carolina Panthers just approved an $800 million renovation project for Bank of America Stadium, which draws as many fans as the Chicago White Sox.
I hope it's 800 million and not 800. That would be pretty.
It's pretty cheap renovation.
Yeah,
they're just putting in a single seat. They're just one extra seat's going in. It's the major.
And
major
it's stuck behind the pillar, so you can't see anything, but you can sit there.
Yeah. It's actually, it's the disability seating. They're doing the disability seaters that way, unfortunately. So.
Yeah, it's seating for, the blind. You sit here because you can't see, because the pillar's right in front of you, right?
Yeah, well, right. They don't need to see anyway, right? They're listening as it is. So it's like, this is why we're putting it. So we got to get extra seat in the house.
Right.
That'd be a cold-blooded look. You got somebody with they can't see and they're sitting behind this pillar.
Yeah.
Oh
Well,
god.
it's like when Stevie Wonder goes to Pistons games. He's got the guy who sits next to him who's telling him what's happening all the time
Oh,
because he
does he?
can't see. Yeah, yeah.
That's true. I
I
guess
don't
that
know if
is.
he probably doesn't go to Pistons games now because nobody goes to Pistons games now. But back in the day, he had this dude who would sit next to him and would just like tell him everything that was going on throughout the whole game.
Man, that'd be crazy. That'd be a crazy way of hey, you got to do what you got to do with it, I suppose. A lot of squeaking you'd be hearing, just squeak, 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 squeak. Go with this. Go.
Right.
Panther Stadium, is it that old? Isn't it? Didn't they? I mean, their expansion franchise, wasn't it new with their expansion franchise thing?
Yeah, I don't know how old it is. I mean, if it came out with the team, then it's 30 years old. Could use some renovations at that point. So I'm not against that, but that
My
talk about a team that just has such a like they're never going to be good. Like it's not about the stadium. Arch Manning isn't going to refuse to play there because he doesn't like the stadium. He's going to refuse to play there because they have the worst owner in football and they don't know how to do anything. And he saw what happened with the last big quarterback they drafted and tried to develop.
yeah, there's no way that he would go to. That's one franchise you can very cleanly say there's no way Arch would go to that one at all. But I mean, shoot, if that's the case, then we're coming around the turn in another 5 years, maybe to needing Lumen Field, have a renovation. Put some seats there, like we're looking at this picture right now. Maybe we'll put some extra seats there on the backside and maybe cover up the view, but add a little bit more gale force voice wind to the proceedings, maybe a little bit. Maybe put a little roof on the top. Dare I say on a renovation, Brendan? What renovation would you do? If you do anything to Lumen?
Whoa. We're getting some like feedback on your microphone. Say something.
Mic check. Mic check.
Yeah. Something's up. Something's not right. I don't know if any of you guys can hear that in the chat, but yeah, there's like some serious crackle going on over there.
Microphone check. Still going?
Yeah, that's really weird. I don't see anybody in chat talking about it. Maybe I'm the only one who can hear it, but yeah, okay. Other people can hear it too.
Okay. Well, let's go through the donos here. We're kind of wrapping up anyway, and I'll work on my issues here. It's maybe something on my end because I can't bounce out and out as I'm running the deal here with you without it causing problems. So
yeah, unplug it, plug it back in again. That's always the move.
Yeah, I think it's my drivers today just went weird for whatever it's on. My audio drivers are causing issues. I don't know what's going on. So real quick here, Addison Shovel, Aaron Rodgers hates Robert Saleh. Did you see Aaron Rodgers pushing Roger Saleh down the side?
Yeah, Aaron Rodgers hates everybody, doesn't he? Aaron Rodgers hates everybody except Aaron Rodgers.
Indeed, I think that Aaron Rodgers has definitely come off as a bit of a douche, and he's sort of leaning into it with time. Weird moment there. It's just a strange look from Aaron Rodgers. I didn't get it, Addison, either. It's like, what are you mad about? You just threw a touchdown. It's like he's pissed off.
He hates everybody except RFK.
That's right. Kasra with another $10 donation. Kasra, I appreciate the double donation. And guys, we've had anybody's donated once, has donated 3 times today on the stream. I really appreciate you guys for all of that support. I don't even know about Burrow. He has been mediocre for 2 years, and everyone only judges him based off of the Super Bowl year. The same people judge Geno using no facts.
I still believe in Burrow. I still think he's an excellent quarterback. I know that the last couple years have been a little more lackluster, but there are extenuating circumstances there. I don't really think they fixed that offensive line anyway, so now he keeps getting hurt because he doesn't have protection. So I still think very highly of Burrow. I understand that people are kind of starting to wonder a little bit, but it's been I maintain my belief that he's a top 4 quarterback in this league.
And we'll finish up with these donos, folks. I don't want to leave off the donos. People get pissed when we do that. I'll mute my mic when I'm talking so Brendan can kind of more answer this. So, Cosra, I can't answer as much because my mic's messing up. I think we touched on that one good. People don't recheck on Geno and where he is right now. They're judging it off New York. That's really where it's coming from as much as ever. That's stuck in their mind there, Cosra. But thank you for the donation. All right. Donations are coming in fast and furious here. All right. Y2K, thank you for another $5 donation. Is play action equal effective on outside run fakes and inside run fakes or zone versus man blocking, Brendan?
I think play action can be effective on any play as long as you can pass protect enough for it to matter. And I think that even includes when you can't run the ball effectively. Play action is still affecting the defense. And I think we see this over and over again. Now, right now, our pass protection isn't good enough to allow play action to have its full effect. But generally speaking, yes, I think that play action is something that you always want to use as long as you can pass protect enough for it to matter on some level.
Play action always works every time Y2K. You don't have to run it effectively. It doesn't have to be run to one side or the other. It always works, or it works for what it's intended, and that's how it's kind of understood there. Last dono from Y2K. Thank you for another donation here, and we'll go ahead and call it on this, folks. So if you put a donation in, we're not going to probably read on that one, but we're going to kind of wrap this one up on it. It says, don't tempt me with terrible RFA quotes, Brendan.
Yeah. Have you heard the whale story, by the way, Brandon, real quick? I know your microphone's going out, but have you heard the whale story with him?
Yes. Yeah, I have. He's a strange duck with the bears and the whales, and
yeah,
don't know what to make of it.
Yeah, the whale one's an all-timer. That one, I gotta appreciate that kind of absolute. I have an appreciation for that kind of absolute insanity.
I do as well. He's wild as hell on it, and it sounds like we're pulling the chat through a painful moment here with my my deal. So we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Brendan, let's go ahead and give your score prediction, and then we'll call it a day.
23-10.
I'm going to go 27-13, 2 touchdown win for your Seahawks as well in this one, and feel very good about that. So Hawks are going to get it comfortably in this one, folks. Both me and Brendan are seeing it 3-0. It should be the way it's going to go here. I want to thank you guys for watching today. Brendan, thank you for doing this. And sorry about the deal on that with the voice thing. I don't know what happened today. Everything just kind of went off the rails on that. But thanks for watching today. Please hit that like button. Please sub up to Seahawks Brendan Nelson on that side of it, the Hawks Nest, whichever end you're watching. Sub up the other if you haven't. Brendan, thank you for doing this, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on.
We'll be back again next week, folks. But until that time, please do not you ever forget, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.